Evening and welcome to the April 9th meeting of the Norton Planning Board. We have several items, our typical internal items, things like minutes and bills. We also have a public hearing, which will be the first item that will be discussed concerning a petition on solar facilities that will be handled at the, help me with the date, is the 17th?
Yep. Yes.
April town meeting, special town meeting. This will be that will be the only item on the agenda for that evening. And then after we have dealt with the solar facilities petition, we will look at status of three decisions that made by the board concerning 154 Plain Street solar facility. Anyway,
I heard 154.
Did I say one?
Sounded like it.
Okay, I apologize. 54 Plain Street and the two Blue Star special permit decisions. I will recuse myself on the solar facilities petition bylaw. I mentioned this when the bylaw was first amended at last year's town meeting, that my family, about a year and a half ago now, has been approached by someone looking to permit on our property a solar facility. It's been on and off again. I don't know what the odds are, 1 in 20 that there'll ever be a proposal that'll come to the planning board. Obviously, I would recuse myself from that, but I don't want to participate in any way, shape, or form on the status of the bylaw. So I will recuse myself, and then when the hearing is closed and a decision by the board is made as to whether it will recommend or not recommend the solar bylaw, after that I'll rejoin the board. So with that, I will turn it over to the vice chairman, and I will sit in the audience.
All right, thank you, Chairman. As Mr. Fernandez stated, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing regarding the proposed amendments and changes to the bylaws. And I'll first ask if there is someone in the audience that will be making any presentation. Sir, please approach.
This is a little tight.
Oh, you can push it up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Cogliano, Bay Road. Well, we're together again as a nice, big, happy family. I want to first thank the board for their recent decision regarding the Next Sun site plan and special permit application. I think given all the information that was provided, that was the right decision. And I think we all learned a lot from that process. Now, in terms of the amendment objective, essentially what we're trying to do is reverse the January 14th, 2019 amendment to return to the original bylaw, which was formed in 2016. What we'd also like to do is form a committee of residents and planning board members to develop and submit a new large-scale solar amendment to the town at fall town meeting. The new amendment would take into account residents' concerns, green communities, a solar future, and address issues raised from the discussion over the Next Sun project. Now, before I get into some of the reasons, I want to show you a video. You'll be the first ones to see. This is the video that we're going to put forth at the town meeting, so I'd appreciate what you think about it. Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
As you drive down Bay Road from Five Corners in Easton, on the right at the entrance to Norton are the Phelan Farms cranberry bogs. On January 14, 2019, less than 110 people at a special town meeting changed the regulation for large-scale solar projects from special permit to as of right, and also allowed solar panel placement over cranberry bogs in Norton. This change also impacted residential 60 and residential 80 zoning districts. The zoning bylaw amendment was pushed through by a small group in the town on the hope of $200,000 in annual payments to the town for 20 years by the solar development company Nexsun. However, the project had to be forced on the neighborhood, with more than the value of the deal being taken from the value of the local residents' homes and their families. Interestingly, SunEdison, also a solar developer with projects in Norton, declared bankruptcy in 2016. Why is this important to you? With as-of-right solar, large-scale solar projects may be coming to your neighborhood without the need of obtaining a special permit. The Phelan Farm solar project proposed approximately 24,000 solar panels, 10 to 13 feet off the ground and covering approximately 63 acres of cranberry bogs. The potential negative impacts included devaluation and damage to the neighborhood, lower tax revenue, risk to well water supplies, and hazards to families and children, including EMF radiation, stray voltage, hazardous materials, and noise. Would you want a power plant in your neighborhood? What action is needed? Please vote yes on Article 1 at the special town meeting on April 17th. Let's return the town's large-scale solar bylaw to special permit and without solar allowed over cranberries until this matter has been fully studied. Let's form a commission of residents and members of the planning board to put forth a new large-scale solar bylaw at the fall town meeting that considers residents' concerns and still embraces a solar future. Let's not create a class of victims in the town with as-of-right solar. Solar is the future, but we don't need to destroy our neighborhoods and harm our families to get there. My name is Joe Cogliano. I am a concerned Norton resident, and I thank you very much.
My name is Kelly Gallagher. These are my children, Emma and Ryan. We live at 201 Bay Road. So the solar developer wants to put about 13-foot high solar panels, 24,000 of them, covering about 63 acres of the cranberry bog. And we've heard from numerous real estate experts that's going to devalue our houses about 20%. And in addition to that, we're very concerned about the health risks to all our children. There are dozens and dozens of children abutting these cranberry bogs. And between the radiation and other pollution that these solar farms produce, we're very, very worried about the health risks.
Yeah, Joel Johnson, 208 Bay Road. I think large-scale solar should be require a special permit here. If you look at the size of this project, it's 60 acres. Special permits require a higher level of review, and I think that's very important when you have such a large-scale project like this and so many people affected. You want that higher level review. If you think about some of the other areas in town, if you're just building a two-family, changing a home from one family to two-family, that simple thing requires a special permit. If you're building an industrial electric plant, I think that should apply the same exact permitting process.
Our biggest concern is supporting the abutters, supporting our neighbors, because this is a huge, large-scale project. And there have been no studies done to really validate what's going to happen to the environment, the wildlife. It's also on watershed property. So these are huge, tremendous concerns for us, as well as the sound, the pile driving that's going to take place. And really, there's been really no studies to show that this is an agro-solar combination that works. There's been studies that show that the productivity reduces. So it just doesn't feel like there's enough to validate really what's going to be happening here in the bogs and over the long term. Thanks for your time.
Hi, I'm Deb Knopf, and this is Sophia, and we live on 5 Fuller Drive. And we feel that large-scale solar is a power plant, and that power plants should require a special permit.
Joe, I'm Ron Sherman, 222 Bay Road, a butter here. I think one of my biggest concerns is preserving the beauty of this area and these wetlands. I think myself and other abutters, when they purchased homes on these wetlands, we had an expectation that they'd remain that way. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns, is that they could be turned into a large-scale power plant, essentially. Yeah, so I think the beauty in preserving the land that we purchased is one of my biggest concerns, and I think along with that, as you can see, this is some wide open spaces, and just not knowing the noise levels and that go along with that, and what that can mean for our homes as well.
What do you think? Did I give up farming and go to Hollywood? Yeah, right. Well, I say, you have to
Here,
admit,
Joe.
yeah, you have to admit, Fred did a great job on those bogs. Aren't they beautiful? He did put a lot of money into that. Well, let's get on to the reasons for why we think this is necessary to reverse this. The January 14, 2019 amendment was pushed through by less than 110 people who meant well, but did not have the time to properly consider the impacts to the community and other issues needed to develop a proper amendment. The objective of the January amendment was to support the Next Sun project and green communities for grant money. You can see that from the town website. Bottom line, it was about raising money for the town and not about proper planning for the town long-term or the potential impact to the community. This was confirmed by the Finance Committee last night when it was stated by a member that the amendment had been supported specifically because of the Next Sun project, and no board member denied this. I believe this happened because Next Sun had an incentive, as part of the incentive program, they had a timeline that they had to meet. And so I think that perhaps not enough study and review was done prior to putting forth that amendment, as would have normally been done. I don't want to go to a lot of detail about the Next Sun project because we spent a lot of time talking about that, but I think it's pretty clear now that the Next Sun project is a mismatch for the SMART program. Whether it's the 24,000 panels on 63 acres, basically representing an industrial project in a residential neighborhood, or the fact that the regulation calls for 2 megawatts of AC, their project is 6.2 megawatts of AC, or the fact that they're using a battery to circumvent the regulation and batteries are not allowed in our town bylaw at present, or the fact that no long-term studies have been done on cranberries over solar, or the fact that the farmer is selling the property to the developer against the spirit of the program, or the fact that this project would be in a well protection zone with other health hazards and risks. I also wanted to point out to you in regards to these types of projects that I recently went over to Hill Street. And I don't know if any of you have listened to that inverter. Have you? Have any of you been over to Hill Street and listened to that? Isn't it amazing? I don't know how those people can live around there. It's just incredible. We've also heard, of course, that the real estate experts have claimed that there'll be a loss of value of about 20% of the properties. If you consider that the properties make up somewhere between $50 and $60 million, that would work out to $10 to $12 million when the deal signed by the town was only for $4 million over 20 years. So that doesn't seem like a very good deal. Let's talk about the second component of that amendment and why we need to reverse it. That would be the green communities component as it relates to as of right. I believe the as of right section of the January 4th amendment was added to the Next Sun requirement, and that this portion of the amendment was also not well thought out as to impact. In fact, Adam Schumacher stated that he didn't want the as of right. That was something that was put in by the town. He was interested in the other portion of the amendment. I understand the town may desire to be part of the Green Communities program, and that program requires as of right, but it does not have to be town-wide. As of right can be for designated areas, such as it was previous to this, commercial and industrial. Now, why is as of right solar in residential areas not appropriate? The question to ask is, does large-scale solar or a solar power plant belong in a residential area? If some residents want it, perhaps it should be by special permit. I mean, we shouldn't deny people that want these things, but then, therefore, that's the reason why it must be special permit. As of right, solar will depress home values in the town and over time impact town tax revenues. We don't need studies to know that nobody wants to live near these things and that they're going to depreciate value. I mean, that should be just obvious. It also will change the relationship between residents and the town by taking value from one area to support the town instead of all residents being taxed equally. So we shouldn't be taking that value from this neighborhood and saying, this is for the good of the town, we're going to take it from you and create a class of victims. That's not the way I think we should be living our lives. It changes the historical reason for zoning, which was separation of use. And it's putting an industrial use into a residential area. That makes no sense. That changes what's been done for about 100 years. It puts residents and families at risk it puts them at unknown risk due to limited studies. And it puts well water at risk due to hazardous materials, including things like batteries. Now, about 9 years ago, I spoke to a man by the name of Dwayne Knapp, who passed away. He used to be the sewer and water commissioner here in this town. And I was very surprised. He told me at that time that it took a very small amount of a chemical to completely destroy a town's water supplies. So that causes me concern when we're talking about putting things like batteries in well protection zones or driving piles down through the ground. Cranberry is a surface activity, cranberry farming. That's a surface activity. That's not what we're doing in this well protection zone if we were to go forward with a project like that. So, as an example, the question would be, why is it necessary to include all R60 and all R80 properties without conditions beyond 5 acres to be as of right? So what's missing from the current bylaw? What would need to be worked on with this group committee that I had mentioned? Well, a new bylaw must address the AC and DC issue. We know that the regulation looks at AC. It doesn't look at DC, which is why we had to deal with this, I'll call it manipulation of the rules to try to use a battery to get around that regulation. A new bylaw must address the battery issue. The town bylaw doesn't address it. Solar projects don't use batteries. That bylaw is from 2016. The incentive program for batteries just started in 2018. Well, if we're going to have new projects come to town that are going to want a battery, that should be in the bylaw. We should deal with that. There are other conditions that could be considered that need to be discussed, amongst residents and the board. One might be, for example, should we require studies prior to any board approval on a project like this? We had gotten to the point where there was a discussion that we needed studies, but we were talking about doing them after the thing had been approved. I don't understand that. That does not make sense. Solar over cranberries, I think we've discussed that enough. Personally, I don't think batteries should be allowed in the wetland or well protected zone district. There needs to be a series of discussions with residents and planning board members and possibly experts on structuring a better large-scale solar bylaw for the town. The Next Sun project has helped us all to learn and understand why the January 14th amendment was incomplete in some ways and overreached in others. So it was incomplete about things like AC, DC batteries, and it overreached by not putting any conditions on as of right for residential, other than the 5 acres, and that seems to me to be arbitrary. I ask that the board support this petition to correct the errors in the January 14, 2019 amendment and to allow the residents and planning board time to prepare a new amendment. I'm assuming for fall town meeting. If it can be done sooner than that, fine, but I think it's going to take time to talk about these things and work through them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cogliano. Any questions from the board or Director of Planning for Mr. Cogliano before he steps down? All right, hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the audience presenting this evening? All right, any other comments, questions from the board at this point?
I've got a question. It's my understanding that a petition as it's been generated, can't be modified at this point. The question I have is it subject to amendment at the town meeting? If we know.
That is my understanding from town council. That
Right,
amendments
mine
could
as
be
well,
made
yeah.
at that, because we have as a town, we have just a couple of things we wanted to mention to you tonight that we will talk about at the town meeting.
That could include something if we would, could this board take some action with respect to this petition and at the same time at this meeting in light of the fact that, I don't know, we'll have one before this meeting on the 17th? But
There's one next week,
Well, next
on the
Tuesday, there's a
16th.
meeting,
there
but
is one on the 16th.
Yes.
Okay. The other
but in
question
terms of a
I had-
timeline in rendering our recommendation on this, I honestly don't, if we're at it, it has to be, 7 days ahead of the town meeting, et cetera.
Right,
Yeah.
because the planning board recommendation has to be brought to a couple other committees, is my understanding.
Yeah.
So I've been asked tomorrow morning, whatever you all do tonight,
Mm-hmm.
we will draft the report up and get it over to them.
Yeah.
Question for you, Paul, maybe
Yeah.
you may not know the answer. One of the things when this first came up to us was the consideration for the town of trying to be classified as a green community. My question, and I was just looking, I think there are like 5 criteria to do that.
Right.
Is, how far along is the town in meeting that criteria? I know this is one of them, being an as-of-right. And then, but the other question, as of right, but there are 4 other criteria. How far along is the town in otherwise meeting that criteria? If they think I have this 20, municipal energy cut use by 20% over 5 years.
Right, we would need to develop the plan to do that, so that's one we're working on, but that one, I don't believe I could say we've accomplished that yet.
Expedited permitting process, that's something that has not been done, but we could do that. It's a year, I think.
Right, and I think that gets tied into the stretch code, which is another requirement. The stretch code is an energy, what the state refers to, but it's an energy efficient code. So that's going to town meeting in May, on May 17th, to adopt the stretch code.
And the other one is department to purchase fuel-efficient vehicles.
We have them.
Yeah, that's being.
And we have charging stations, and we have several vehicles that have, they're hybrid gas and electric.
Okay. So it would look like this as-of-right siting is one of the conditions that really stands in the way of getting that full community
Right.
Green classification. I'm not sure what benefits that they are to the town, but leaving that aside for the moment, did we get clarification as to whether or not you can be specific in terms of location for as-of-right siting?
You can't.
Well, yeah, and as Mr. Cogliano correctly pointed out, we do allow as of right in commercial and industrial, and we were confirming this with the Office of Energy Resources, and their issue was as long as you have it allowed in some zoning category, you're allowed to go forward with it.
Right, so Paul, it doesn't have to be in a residential category.
No. At the time when this was going through back in, starting in November or so in the fall, when we saw the requirement, we understood that the language for as of right meant the special permits. And when we saw that language, we thought, oh, this must be a concern that the state is having with it. So that's when that proposal went through. But again, if you all were to support the change that they have here to revert back to allowing special permits for R60 and R80, we would still be fine. The only thing we're still asking the state about is the deletion of the definition of as of right. I spoke yesterday with Seth Pickering from the Office of Energy Resources. He needed to talk to some of his folks there at the department to see if that's going to be an issue or not. But he recognizes that we do allow it by site plan only in commercial and industrial.
Okay, and that right now is, for lack of a better term, minus the definition potentially being removed as of right, which could potentially fulfill this first criteria that Orin is asking about.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Orin, I didn't mean to step on your
No,
toes.
that's fine, thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. If you'd come up to the,
In relation to what you were just describing, removing that definition wasn't there in the prior article, correct?
Correct, it was not.
So then it still would be fine for commercial and industrial.
We think so,
Yeah.
but we pulled that definition from the states. There was a guidebook that they have on, for the green communities, and when they talked about as of right, that definition was taken from that. So that's why we added it, and I just want to make sure that that definition, if we remove it, wouldn't cause the state to give them any problems with it.
So, for example, let's say that you find that out before the meeting next week.
Yeah, and they have our timeframe, so
Okay.
hopefully they'll get it to us before then.
So what might be possible is on the floor to modify this such that as of right is defined for commercial and industrial. That's something maybe then we could do? Is that what we're saying? In other words, if that definition needs to be in there for those two districts, maybe that's something we could add on the floor to,
Yeah, because wasn't that, Orin, your point of if when we're at town meeting, if something is presented to the moderator in writing,
Correct.
right.
that would then be an amendment to the article that's being presented as part of the warrant?
Right,
And
which
is
would
that
go
what-
through a vote process as well.
Itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. To
be
And that's,
considered,
and
yeah.
Amy confirmed that that could happen, Paul.
Correct.
Okay.
So you're saying the modification must be in writing?
It must be in writing, yes.
It's an amendment, not a modification.
Yeah, an amendment, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Orin's got the correct terminology there, yeah. But it has to be in writing to the moderator, I believe.
Okay, so I just hope that I came across with the fact that we'd like to work with the board to improve this bylaw, to protect the town, and also take into account the green communities. I don't think anybody's against that. We just want to make sure that projects such as Next Sun, which I think really kind of went over the edge, that we don't have to deal with that again, because it took a lot of people's time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
So it's literally basically a word-for-word deletion of what was proposed in January from my review.
Right, deletion and addition. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then it looks like, according to the bylaws, the last time this was modified was in 2016, so it seemed to have been, for lack of a better term, working for about 2 years before this modification came to us.
It was in effect, and
Yeah. It was
in effect.
And then you had Hills, well, certainly Clapp Street would have been reviewed under this. I don't know if Hill Street
Okay.
was reviewed. Well, 2016 amendments, no, it would not. Hill Street would not have been. 2014, it would have.
Yeah, because it looks like it was added in 14, in May of 14, amended in October of 14, and then amended again in October of 16. So just to note that we aren't making, if we were to agree to this, that it had been a withstanding bylaw that was in effect and functioning, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, there was still a process in place.
Right,
You know, that we would follow.
right.
Any other questions or comments?
Just on the as of right, the other issue, there's a deletion of the language that was added regarding smaller scaled solar. That was just added because this provision, the bylaw only speaks to those projects that qualify as a large scale, which is roughly 250 kilowatts. But it says that it's silent about anything underneath it. So this language was added back in January to really speak to the process that has been, that we go through, but it's not identified in the code. This really doesn't get to as of right of large-scale facilities. So,
If I can ask, was that
Yeah.
section added,
yes,
right? The
that
smaller
provision
scale, 'cause
was added.
We went and, kind of clearly defined large versus,
Yes.
other, in essence. Yeah.
So, Paul, how was that dealt with prior to January?
Well,
If this wasn't a part of, let's say, the revision that happened in 2016, how would this have been dealt with?
Essentially, building permits. So we get requests, or people come in and talk about wanting to put much smaller facilities. So, but our code doesn't speak to, the bylaw does not speak to these smaller facilities. So for the couple months I had been here before this went into effect, I would meet with the building commissioner regarding these proposals, and it would be dealt with that way. So that's what this was just trying to codify, was there that, any small scale would still go through, would be determined, the approvals would ultimately be determined by the building commissioner in association with the planning director.
This amendment takes that out, takes that small,
Yes, this is strict.
That's that's the proposed change.
Do we know the reasoning why this proposal is removing that portion of it?
I would ask Mr.
I know Mr.
Cogliano.
Cagliano raised his hand, so I'll ask him to approach.
At the time this was done, it was really just done to put us back to zero, to start over again. But if the board thinks that language is important, I think that could be another motion on the floor to add to this amendment. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that if it seems like it's a positive thing for the town. So we shouldn't let that stop it. If the board is willing to support this, we could find out about the as-of-right language for commercial and residential if that's needed, and we could put that language in also for the small-scale panels.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? If If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Oh, go ahead, Orin. I'll
Orin-
second.
Orin
I'll
and
second
Julie.
Orin's motion.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing regarding the solar facilities petitioner's bylaw amendment? Aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. It passes unanimously, so the public hearing is closed. And I'll open it up to the planning board for any further discussion and/or recommendations regarding the proposed amendments for town meeting.
I would just like to state, I think, speaking for myself, I know when this first came to us, clearly, I don't think I had any idea of the significance and the ramifications of the impact and what it actually meant. It seemed to be more perfunctory in terms of what was there. We've learned a lot over the last couple of months in going through this process, and I think in light of that, I don't know that I myself would have taken the same position at the earlier amendment, so I would endorse trying to at least take us back to where we were with the opportunity to try to put the things in place that really need to be put in place.
I would second that, Orin. When we first looked at this, I guess maybe didn't have an appreciation of the size of what the proposal would be forthcoming. In my mind, it had been something that was smaller scale. So I do feel like I have gained a wealth of knowledge in solar that I never thought I would. And that's, both to the applicant and to the residents. And I would agree with Orin that maybe this is something we need to take some more time to really review and look at and make sure that we're providing the right guidance for applicants forthcoming.
Yeah, and if I may, just wanted to add to what Mr. Cogliano was saying about other amendments to the bylaw. And, I think we need to be looking at provisions that talk about sound, provisions about location of the inverters, and other issues like requiring a fencing around the inverters, around the apparatus, around the solar arrays. So I think that's direction. I'd obviously work with you all to decide if we go forward with that.
Yeah, certainly, to really echo Orin and Julie in their comments, we all learned a tremendous amount of information, of understanding of all of the impacts that something like, the scale of this project could be. I'm sure there's more to learn. We took in a lot of information, we digested a lot of information, and, we processed that information. And, there's definitely opportunity to refine this much further with some of the more specifics that we learned throughout this process the past few months, that I think we can, take and use to, draft the most effective and useful bylaws that can support this. All right, any other comments from the board or any other recommendations?
So, Paul, we have to vote to move it to town meeting with our endorsement? Is that
Right, we're
Correct.
providing
Correct.
either a recommendation for or against this
Okay.
to bring to town meeting.
Okay.
And we can't include any recommended changes.
That's my understanding. It's on its entirety, so there's the 4 sections that are being deleted. As identified, sections 175, section 22-1, as the definition of as of right, and then a deletion in paragraph D, the deletion of paragraph E, and the insertion of new language, basically pulling in the language that was there before. And then also 175-22-3, section A, the last portion of that which speaks to the agricultural solar tariff generation unit clause. So in essence, it's removing what was changed and added at the prior town meeting.
Yeah, as rushed as it was previously, I think, this section E there, the smaller scaled ground or building mounted, that would That's actually one of the good parts of this, and I don't know, I feel like this is also rushed. And I understand the urgency as to why. But I don't think that should be removed, that portion of it. That's just my thought.
Yeah, no, I was along the same lines
I
with you, that section in itself.
And if we put it forward, I mean, we're counting on amendment be given at the meeting itself.
Right.
So, you know,
Right.
I'm not
And,
sure I'm comfortable with that either.
You know, as I understand it, you know, we cannot take these each of these changes on its own, but it's collectively, because that's how it was presented, as a collective amendment. So that's what's in front of us. All right, any further discussion, recommendations?
I'll move to adopt, for the board to make a recommendation to endorse the proposed amendments.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor, seconded. All right, the motion on the floor is to recommend moving forward with the proposed amendments to the town meeting on April 17th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nays?
Nay.
One nay, so we'll go by roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Frank? Aye. Lauren?
Aye.
Steve?
Nay.
And I will vote yay as well to this, so 4-1 vote. So that passes recommendation to the town meeting of the proposed amendments. I welcome our chairman, Mr. Fernandez, back to the board.
Now that you've made your vote, let me just speak personally before I sit down as a member of the planning board. I wholeheartedly agree with the petition. Again, I abstained when this first came up. I abstained obviously from this, but I will not abstain at town meeting because this should not take place in a residential area without a special permit. Beyond that, I think, to Mr. Cogliano's point, we need to take a holistic approach to how we deal with solar farms. And even in a commercial or an industrial zone, we have sidelines of whatever it is, 30 feet. That's
Very
not
minimal,
appropriate.
Very minimal.
Beyond that, we also have what's the word for it? Non-conforming uses, i.e. residential uses in commercial and industrial zones that should be protected. So we have to have some type of codicil that says, notwithstanding the fact you're in a commercial and industrial zone and we'd like to see that done by right, if it's within a certain distance of a residential use, then you may have to revisit the concept of a special permit. But anyways, I just throw that out there. Okay, so we're back to what I hope is.
Mr. Fernandez, will you be speaking at the special town meeting? I'd like you to.
I'm in a bad spot, and again, just to put it out there,
Perhaps you could state that at the meeting, at the same time, I want everybody to know, if you disclose,
yeah,
I love you like a brother.
in our particular case, if it happens, and again, it's a long shot, but nevertheless, the only people to be affected would be family members, and there is just one residence that may or may not be affected, but that's that. Yeah, I mean, if the planning board had not recommended this, I would have spoken. You folks have done an admirable job. Where the issues are pretty well defined in terms of your petition, I don't know that my piping is particularly useful, but I think there's still work to be done on a solar bylaw.
Do you think, now since we're all here together, how much time are we talking to do that? I just said fall because I just assumed that would be good. How much time will we need to actually work through these issues?
Well, the adage that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, I've been involved in different things that, you know, there are 350 other communities in Massachusetts that at some level must deal with this, and I think we reach out, there are listservs, there are groups that, can be contacted to see what other people are doing, and rather than reinvent the wheel, you know, they're, I'm sure, dealing with the same types of issues, perhaps in some cases better than we are, perhaps in cases not as well. But I think we start with that, grab that, and work off of that, because again, this isn't, I mean, it's an involved issue, but it's not, you know, it's not rocket science. You know, there's the issues of noise, there's the issues of potential health impacts, there's the issues of view. But if we're going to be dealing, if this thing passes, with commercial and industrial zones as of right, and then special permit for residential applications, then, you know, again, the issue is somewhat confined to what comes up in a special permit for residential. But I think the fall is doable, but that's if we, you know, I thought a couple other things were going to be doable this year, and we got bogged down with not only this, but not bogged down's the wrong word. You know, we've gotten, we've been involved with, you know, Blue Star, with this, with a couple other things. So if there's no other large development, then perhaps we can devote some more time to this and get it done. But in the meantime, I think this is a good first, a good step back, I think is what I'd call it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really just up to all those involved with that process, whomever that may be, you know, with how quickly that happens. It's
Yep.
the effort that it's going to take to do that, and once it's at a comfortable place, if that's in advance of the fall town meeting and in time to do so, then that's when it takes place. If more time is needed, you know, I'm having some flashbacks of our, you know, recreational marijuana discussions that we had on and off for a considerable amount of time, and, you know, take the time to do it right would be the best, you know, advice with it.
Thank you. All right, do we have
Right.
bills to be paid?
No bills.
No bills?
Bills?
Just to get them out of the way, we have, it's March 26th, the only set of minutes we
Yes.
need to approve. I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at that, or we can put that on for later.
Okay, we're gonna go, you're not gonna change your mind now, right?
As soon as you walk out the door, we'll listen to that door slam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we hold off on March 26th?
Yeah, I have not seen these until right now, so I have not had a chance to read.
Were they in Dropbox the other day? Paul, we're noticing like a thing with Dropbox
No.
today.
I put them in
I didn't see him in Dropbox.
yesterday.
I didn't.
I didn't have a chance to look at them in the last 2 days, but
I
yeah.
couldn't see them in my Dropbox today.
And they were there,
But then they showed up after I added in the other ones, it
Right.
showed up that they were there.
Yeah, on Friday, it was showing there was nothing in there at all.
What time on Friday?
And I don't recall why.
I worked for 17 hours, I don't know, anytime in between.
Afternoon?
I think it was late afternoon, yeah.
I put them in there
After- after
before.
I got
I
your
don't know, it
I
was
got
the
your
same
email
day
like
you sent
2:30
the
or something.
email.
Yeah.
No,
I saw it. I mean, I saw at least the
Okay.
The folder was ready.
initial information.
But about a half an hour later, it was up, so
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, because I saw once at 7 o'clock and then 7:15, so then I asked just a question back, what time is the meeting?
We had Paul running around.
All right.
All right, special permit, 48354 Plain Street. Why don't we start with that and see what we can or can't accomplish. We have a draft.
You actually have two. One is the strictly black and white one is one that, actually, we just received today. This was from Amy. It was her comments on the draft that I had produced after last Tuesday's meeting. Her comments were pretty straightforward. They were pretty minor in nature. It was making some corrections, such as saying the site plan to site plan approval. Her email to me was these were minor changes to it. So if you had a chance, hopefully you all saw it. Not confident Dropbox was behaving correctly.
Yeah.
But what I did after Tuesday's meeting was Wednesday, I updated both building, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one, on 54 Plain. So you haven't seen this before. So I had just drafted the decision, plus considering some of the things we were talking about, that's what was added, I included in the initial draft. So, and then, Orin now has handed out comments to, he hadn't seen Amy's response, so he has comments on 54 Plain Street as well. And it looks like it mirrors comments you had made on
Yeah,
Blue Star.
I saw that, this is first on the agenda, so I just wanted to make sure that it
Yeah.
was referenced in, just for upward discussion. Basically, there are a couple of things in the bylaws that seem to contradict what we have in the decision. I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I made some edits that I thought complied with that, but I did that in both cases. In the one case, and I think I had previously sent you the actual reference to the code reference in both cases. In the one, for example, we talked about in the standard conditions of approval number 4, the bylaw in 15.8 says that any changes proposed to the approved site plan must be submitted for review by the planning board before such change is made. The planning board may authorize a change if it's deemed to be a minor change. Changes deemed major shall be submitted for application. In this draft, we just had it going to the director. I just suggested that, in keeping with the bylaw, that we had it reviewed by the director. If there's a minor change, then I think the board still has to approve it. If it's a major change, it has to go through. And that's just keeping with the bylaw.
Comments or questions on that point? I didn't notice it before. It goes on to say zoning ordinance is zoning bylaw. Ordinances are cities and bylaws are towns. Rather than take votes on it, I'm going to assume, unless there's objection, that change is acceptable to folks. If it's not, we can vote on things. The next comment, Lauren.
The next one, again, goes to, this is it's binding on the landlord and the successors and signs. That's language that I'm not sure where it came from, but it's certainly applicable. But under our operational handbook, settings and conditions on a special permit, it states a statement as to whether or not the special permit may be transferred through the sale of the property. Any transfer of ownership permitted shall require the applicant and the buyer to appear before the board and show proof that the new owner will be keeping the establishment in the manner in which the permit was originally granted. This is a little bit going to what Amy was concerned when I raised the issue about, like, there needs to be cross easements, there needs to be cross parking easements in a different project, and one where the stormwater retention is off-site, off of a different site. And certainly while they own their own property, those easements and restrictions don't really apply. This, I think, gives the board the opportunity to say, we're saying you can transfer this permit, but we want to make sure when you do, the necessary things are in place. So if they were to sell off one site, that new site would be subject to an easement that requires them to do something or share parking or whatever. And the same thing is true with even this, and I think even more so. We're expecting some level of expertise in what they're doing when they're putting in these types of panels next to our school. And so we may, in this case, even want to have it not transferable without coming to the board. So I leave that back to the board. I'm just citing what's now in our handbook, and leave it to the board to discuss how they'd like to proceed.
I thought I had the handbook with me.
What's the enforceability of our operational handbook? Is it just like a tool that we're supposed to use, or is this something that applicants should be referencing and utilizing as well, I guess is my question.
I mean, it doesn't have, it's not a bylaw, so it wouldn't, it's not a, it does not have to be enforced. There was a comment that Amy had made on this provision, and what it says is, this addition is now making the special permit run with the owner instead of the land, which is problematic unless the bylaw provides that one of the special permits runs with the owner. Not aware that our bylaw, you know, runs with the owner. I mean, typically, it's running with the land.
Yeah, I agree with Amy on this.
Yeah, my worry is if the handbook says something different than the bylaw, how we would potentially rectify that. That's kind of what Amy's saying.
I don't see how we could call people in at a sale, a transfer of ownership. I wouldn't recommend it at all.
Well, you have a project that started under a permit, but if you're not imposing now the conditions that run on different lots for that permit.
Well, let's stick to this.
Okay.
'Cause
But the
That's-
conditions would be for the lot, not for the owner.
Right, they
Yes,
run
they are
with the
for the owner,
land.
but it's for the land. It's not for,
But if I own a land and it says somebody's got to maintain a stormwater retention pond there for my benefit,
But again, let's stick to this one here, because that's not applicable to this special permit.
I guess in this case, my concern would be, we're relying on some people with some expertise in what they're doing. And if somebody comes in and has not done a solar farm before, or has not the credibility, the insurance, or whatever in place to take over that project, we have a concern in making sure that.
And I thought I brought the handbook with me, and I didn't.
This is my copy, Judge, feel free.
Can you, 15-8?
Page 24.
Don't have that one.
I think that would be setting a bad precedent.
The special
stay
permit
with the
runs with the
site.
land.
It runs with the land,
The
right?
proposed wording change would have it run with the ownership rather than the land, and I think that's a bad precedent to set.
Yeah, I don't know how we could pull.
And this is-
in as they
Yeah,
change the
you
land.
can't.
This is one parcel, so unless they subdivide it, it's still subject to the sale to another owner. And, you know, from the town's perspective, we still enforce these conditions
Yeah, regardless of.
regardless of ownership.
Let me just, are you looking at condition 1? Condition of the special permit should cover the following areas. Number 1, proof of ownership.
No, 8.
I'll read it, just so, a statement as to whether, this is what should be in a special permit. A statement as to whether or not the special permit may be transferred through the sale of the property. Any transfer of ownership permitted should require the applicant and the buyer to appear before the planning board and show proof that the new owner shall keep the establishment in the manner in which the permit was originally granted. Transfers of ownership should be recorded with the planning board. To be honest, the handbook, in my time here, and that means nothing, has not been, you know, the Bible. We've looked at the zoning bylaws, obviously. I have a problem with that because, in essence, it could make a piece of property worthless.
I have a major problem with that, yeah.
Because notwithstanding the fact the special permit was issued, which historically runs with the land regardless of ownership, by requiring an approval by the planning board, an approval of new ownership, I mean, that infringes on the value of the property by virtue of the fact that the planning board could say, no, we can't transfer it to Nicole for whatever reason, or we can't, and you know,
It could scare off a potential buyer too, you know, you have to come into the planning board before you purchase this. They might just say, to heck with it, we'll go somewhere else.
well, but on what basis would, I mean, if someone were to come to us now, on what basis would we say, no, we don't think you're a qualified purchaser? That, to me, is, you know, there's plenty of due diligence that takes place in terms of financing, assuming a bank is going to be financing a sale or a purchase. You know, that financing institution is going to want to make sure that whoever it is that's buying it has the capability of maintaining and running it. I've frankly had not noticed this, and I have an issue with incorporating that into the special permit, whether it's this or frankly any other. I certainly want whoever buys it to be bound by the original conditions that were placed upon the project, which in this case they would without this language. But again, I have a problem including that language.
And if the owner, the new owner, were to make changes to the solar arrays, that would trigger a modification.
Mr. Chairman, we had this very thing come up today, whereas a previous order of conditions was researched, and we looked it up and made sure that these conditions were held for before going towards any type of project on Farmers Drive.
Well, let me, just to kind of move along, why don't,
No, I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I'm not saying one way or the other that.
Okay.
I'm just listening it for informational purpose, so we know it's there. And again, I don't know how binding the handbook is myself.
Yeah.
I'm getting a sense, and again, I'm just trying to read tea leaves here, that there's not support for including this language and using your document as the document that we're going to work off of. If you disagree with me, then we can put it to a vote. I just want to make sure that.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. Again, I don't have the notes from Amy on this document, because I didn't have it when I was doing it.
Yeah, and you have the hard copy
You
of
have
it
to
now.
combine both of them.
And they're in,
Okay.
theoretically in Dropbox now, but.
So this,
But, yeah,
All right,
I
all
would,
right.
yeah, agree with not adding that language.
okay, so that we're not actually, I'd forgotten that Orrin wasn't working off of Amy's. So
Yeah, I just didn't.
we're going to use Amy's as the guiding document. There is not objection to including Orrin's language at 4, but we're not going to use language at 6.
Number 4, you're,
We are,
Change the ordinance to
Okay.
bylaw.
change the word bylaw, change ordinance to bylaw, but
Right.
we
Yep.
are going to, because I think it does make sense that the planning board should be the one that approves minor modifications.
okay, so
I mean, if
approved.
they're- I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Okay, if I, the next page, I just highlighted the time for construction. I have no idea. This is near the school. Is there any time-sensitive timing for construction around the school? It's just 7 to 7. I just didn't know whether that's something we wanted to talk about. I have no sense myself.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, well, obviously during school hours, if they're gonna construct during the school year.
Yeah, again, it's going to have to be constructed.
Yeah, that might be tough to get around.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think we have to leave.
I mean, I would say
standard
that,
language in there.
I would say that the starting time is probably good, because technically the school opens at 7:30, so that's when the school buses will start rolling in, and myself as a drop-off parent are rolling in at that time, so if any material needs to be delivered to the site, if it opens at 7, that gives them about a half hour to get things onto the site, which would be good, because that area is extremely congested between 7:30 and 7:45 would just pick up and drop off. So I think if they're gonna hopefully get there a little bit sooner, that might help alleviate some of the congestion in that area.
Do we know when they plan to start?
I believe
I know
the
they
applicant said this summer.
Yeah, so that might not be a problem.
Yeah.
I realize
In the summer, that's great.
I made an error on this, my apologies. It says Monday through Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, that's right.
Saturday's usually a generally working day.
But-
Something called out another special time.
But I believe Saturday was The hours were slightly
You
different.
would later start
Yeah,
that.
eight,
Yeah, it's
uh,
start-
eight-
8
Yeah.
to 4, I
8 to
think.
4, I think is what we had.
And nothing on,
I think we should be consistent.
nothing on
Yeah.
Sundays.
Sundays and holidays.
Right,
usually.
Sundays and holidays, no, yeah.
Should we be specific about the holiday portion of it too?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just,
It's in,
I think it's
Oh,
it's
is
in
it?
there,
Oh,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Sundays and holidays,
no,
yeah.
Highland Park.
Yep, there we go.
so it'd be 7 AM to dusk or 7 PM, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 on Saturday, nothing on Sunday or holidays. Okay. Is that what we all
Yeah.
feel is necessary? Okay.
Yep.
Let me just see what.
She had today, signs must be installed, section 6 of that.
I'm sorry?
I'm just following down Amy's copy. Signs must be installed,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay.
In item 8, again, I was looking at implementation of a plan under 15.9. It says that the building inspector may allow the applicant to occupy the buildings prior to completion of the site plan, provided all requirements of the building code are met. In such case, the building inspector, after consultation with the planning board, shall require the applicant to post a bond in the form of cash or, at the discretion of the board, a letter of credit, in an amount sufficient to ensure completion of the site plan, and shall, after consultation with the planning board and town council, require the applicant to execute a surety agreement. I'm just trying to reflect what's in that section. I just sort of do it on a shorthand basis. At least having consultation with the board as to what they're doing and what they're looking for.
Wasn't there a difference, Joe, you mentioned between surety and bill? When we approve a bill, it's not the same as surety.
Well, surety is an amount that is generally calculated by our consultant for, and let's take this case here, there are going to be berms, there's going to be landscaping. I certainly have no idea what the cost of berming is going to be and what the cost of landscaping. And typically, that is set, not set, but the amount is calculated for something like this by the consultant. In cases like subdivisions where there's asphalt for roads and curbing and the like, the highway department, highway superintendent generally weighs in. Just again, no offense to Paul, but
I'm not an engineer.
I remember seeing your resume, but I don't know that you're a cost estimator. So I'm, who is consulting with the planning board? The planning director?
It looks like it's the building inspector. This is the language. I think I gave it to you.
Traditionally, in our experience, we work with the town planner, go out and do the final walkthroughs, prior to any final occupancies, and make sure every aspect of the special permit, landscaping,
Right.
hardscape, drainage,
For-
has been completed.
For the release of the funds.
Right, but the
Yeah.
setting of what
setting
the
of-
amount is of surety is generally done by the consulting engineer.
Right,
So,
in collaboration with the town. I think the way this would work, as Oren's presented it, would be that we would have the report, the estimates done by the peer reviewer, and we would present it back here.
can I just suggest that just a grammatical change? The applicant must meet with the planning board, the planning director, who shall, just insert the word who shall determine, comma, after consulting with the planning board, comma, the appropriate surety amount. Because when I first read this, I thought you were asking the applicant to consult with the planning board. It's the
Yeah.
planning.
Yeah.
So if if it reads, "The applicant must meet with the planning director, comma, who, comma, after consulting with the planning board, comma, shall determine the appropriate surety amount."
I agree.
Okay. Okay. Trying to find occupancy. Amy has something. Amy points out that Clapp Street had a 10-year, I'm sorry.
That was
jumping.
me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. On item 11, Paul has pointed out that Clapp Street had a 10-year, in essence, guarantee for the shrubs.
Our bylaw speaks to 2 years.
Under post-construction, we're requiring them to have to maintain and replace landscaping. So I'm not sure
Right.
whether there's the,
Well, it has to correspond.
okay. but
If we
that-
say 2 years, then the post-construction should only be for the 2-year period.
Oh, I didn't think we were limiting that requirement to continue to maintain it. I don't think it was just limited to this is a guarantee of 2 years, but in terms of maintenance and ongoing maintenance, I think I would suspect we would require them to continue ongoing maintenance and replacement of fencing and lighting.
Well, that
Okay.
would be, yeah, that would be ongoing, yeah.
But I'm just
Okay.
concerned that this 2-year guarantee was trying to limit that in some way, as opposed to expanding on it.
So
Yeah, I'm
within,
trying to recall on Clapp Street how we got to that 10-year point. I know that there was a lot of discussion by both the owner-developer of that solar field as well as with the residents, and that they came to a decision, and I don't know who offered that up or how that came about. But I think that was very specific to that project.
Well, here again, particularly where it's near the school, I don't have an issue with the 10-year specification as to the owner will maintain and guarantee that they will, the whatever shrubs are there are surviving. The work at Clapp Street, I don't know why it wouldn't work here, but that's just me. If they all
Yeah,
die,
I mean, yeah.
they all die in 2 years, what's the
Right, I
point of having
mean,
it?
whether it's, you know, whether they have a warranty with their supplier or not, I mean, that's not necessarily our
Our concern.
concern, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good for 10 years.
10 years? Okay. Oh, well, you all have to vote.
Yeah, when this is all said and done.
Right.
Trying to- Looking at Amy under post-construction, number 5. Oh, yeah, this is where the 5%.
Joe, do you mind if we just talk about 4 real quick?
Absolutely not, no.
So hours of operation, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Isn't it really only going to be operation during daylight hours because there's no batteries?
Right, what the applicant said there, because there aren't batteries when the sun goes down, the inverters shut off.
Right. Should that be,
But does it cease to?
Edited or-
That's a great question, but does the facility cease to still completely, is it still operational
We
at
said there
that
was a
time?
time period afterwards, but I don't think it was as long as the other one.
No, you're correct.
Yeah.
It would shut off because they don't have batteries.
right? So just
I just want to make sure we're
more
not,
question than a proposed change.
Yeah.
But when I read that, I thought, oh, well, it's not really operating 24/7, right? We're not going to
Yeah, I mean,
allow.
there's not people there.
Right,
there's not
exactly.
Traffic.
No,
there's not-
exactly. It's not
yeah.
like, it's not like there's
I
going
mean-
to be trucks in and out, so to
Yeah,
speak.
Right.
Right.
But didn't know kind of if that's something to dialogue around or not, so.
Which one is it, from dusk to dawn, or dawn to dusk?
Well, again, they might be working a little bit after dusk too, so you don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they're going to do what they're going to do regardless of what we put on here.
True.
I don't know that they can.
The mechanical element of it, Joe, yeah.
I think the limitations of the panels are going to define the operation.
Yeah, which is
I hear
true.
what you're saying,
Yep.
but
Yeah. Fair enough. Just as long as they don't, throw on batteries later on.
Well, that would be a big, that would
Yeah,
be a
exactly.
change.
That would be a major change.
future
right,
planning
Orin?
board will
That-
see.
That would trigger us, right?
That would probably,
So now, who wrote this item 5 on
I
the
just-
sound study?
Yeah,
That
I
was
just
me.
questioned
That was
that.
Paul? Okay.
in consultation with an acoustic engineer and also the building
Can we ask them
commissioner.
as part of that study to determine the decibels as well as megahertz?
Well, he didn't talk about it in terms of decibels and megahertz. So, the background of this provision is, again, was how can we come up with some strategy to ensure that we do not have off-site noise impacts. So, what this talks about is a general study that ultimately would be designed by an acoustic engineer, someone who is an expert in decibels and megahertz and other things, to first measure the ambient background noise, so inverters off, and then compare that with inverters on. Now, let me back up and just also state that the applicant saw this and was fine with the language. So what we working with Chris, to try to determine how do we address this issue of the 10 decibels, which we know can be problematic, and balancing that with what the applicant said, which was some percentage above what the manufacturers. We had problems with that because the enforcement of that could be very challenging. So we had the idea that let's measure background noise. And the way the study would work roughly, again, this would have to be designed by an acoustic engineer and peer-reviewed by our acoustic engineer. So what they would do is primarily study 24 hours a day for roughly a week, maybe 10 days, get that background, get what the overall average is, and then, in this case, if they could, when they kick up the inverters, if they exceeded 10% above that background noise. So if the background was 50 decibels, just say, and I don't know what the equivalent of megahertz would be, but if we wanted to measure it in those terms, we could add that. But if we set a threshold of 10 decibels, 10% increase, then if they hit it or exceed it, then we would require a mitigation strategy, which again would be recommended by acoustic professionals to help figure out the best way of doing this.
I'm not sure, in terms of frequency and megahertz, you're only speaking at a 10% increase of what that impact is,
Right.
Sound decibels, that's one thing, but I think it's a different, you have to consider that differently in terms of any change in
I know.
frequency,
And, at this point,
And that's, yeah.
without having had the benefit of fully diving into this, like if we do go forward on a bylaw amendment, we feel like this is enforceable. It would give us the benefit of a study that sets background levels, and if it exceeds, granted, it's 10%, that was an arbitrary.
So can we suggest a minimum amount of days that we're going to have the study performed for? At least the initial one? You mentioned 7 to 10 days, 24 hours a day.
I'm not an acoustic, right, that's what
Yeah.
the person I had spoken with said. I guess the thing I like about what we have here is a lot of the study they have to hire an
Yeah.
acoustic, we
Right.
have the language, they have to hire an acoustic engineer who's certified, and we would too.
Well, my concern would be, I want to see what the background levels would be on a Monday and Tuesday, but also Saturday, Sunday, because they're going to be different. So if we stipulate a certain number of days in a row, or, must be on weekdays and weekends.
Minimum?
Yeah,
Minimum number of days?
Yeah,
Consecutive
and
days.
certain points around it too. I mean, if we can stipulate that, I mean, I think if you take it from
Well-
one position on the main road, you're gonna get the highest
Well,
noise level.
we do. We say at the boundary, the property boundary, as well as at Nurse Elementary School, as well as at the nearest habitable residence. So that there is a parameter there.
Okay.
But we also want to make sure, well, we know that the property behind them is owned by, it's in conservation or
Yeah.
preservation, so.
Yes, right.
But in the future, we need to be careful if a site's vacant, but it's a residentially zoned private property, we don't want to render it uninhabitable either, so. But certainly getting it at the property line is a big factor, but certainly in this case with the sensitivity of the school there.
Yeah, the more details we can get on this, the better it'll
Yeah.
be, going forward for the next one.
What about the playground? Is this the school building? We talked about the playground as well?
Well,
Well, I mean,
Talk of
it-
moving
you
the
know,
playground too, right?
yeah,
This
that's a,
mentions, Norris Elementary School, and one could question where at on Norris Elementary School.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The closest point of the building, playground, I mean, there's a lot of parameters here.
right.
Well, if it's,
That-
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that was all, just, I mean, just a matter of how specific we
Yeah.
get at this phase
Yeah, that's-
of the process.
Right, and in some ways, that's why, because of that, the specificity, ensuring this to, an acoustic engineer firm could help us ensure that it's the appropriate, the appropriate measure. But certainly, again, the idea of at least a minimum of, say, 7 consecutive days,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think, based on what I heard from that acoustic engineer, I don't think we would have an issue with that. So if we wrote it as minimum,
Bonus points for more days. Yeah, I mean, the more information you get beforehand, the
Yeah, but I
easier it
think,
is
yeah,
to
that's
say.
where,
Yeah.
we need
At least-
to rely on
say
someone to
at
provide
least-
some of that.
Yeah, just at least 7
Specifics.
consecutive days.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
yeah, minimum or at least, okay.
But then you
A
have
minimum,
to, are you taking an average of high and low, what do you measure?
My understanding
you
is
know?
it's the average
Well,
of the entire
but
period.
That entire
So,
period, okay.
But a couple of things. First of all, I wasn't clear, I don't think this is clear as to who's going to pay for it, particularly where it says the applicant and the town will contract for peer review to review the results. The applicant should pay for the initial
Yes.
sound study and also the peer review.
Correct.
So we need to put language in there that says the applicant pays both his original sound study and then the peer review. The other thing that I would suggest is that prior to construction, the baseline study be done at the property lines. Because that sound is going to be louder after everything's cleared, in terms of baseline.
so, okay, so prior to construction,
Prior to,
So there should be
site
a line item
clear,
earlier.
in other words, go out there before you do anything and do
Okay.
your baseline study.
Right.
Because
Clearing
once
the
they
trees.
clear
Yeah, before
20
you clear the
acres,
trees.
Okay.
the baseline's gonna be higher.
okay, so what will happen there, I'll just have to work this, so this background study, we will move to prior to under prior to
Yeah, I
construction.
mean, however you do it, whether it's here and specified that it happens before construction, but I think it's important to do that baseline while the trees are still there.
Yeah, this is, just my preference going forward would be to do the background study either, I would like to see if we can do this as part of the application submittal, as part of the background research, as part of the bylaw, or at minimum, give you the ability to raise that as a condition, that prior to construction like this, you need to do your background study, and then your post-construction, compare where you're at, and if you're 10% above, then you need to mitigate. So I can move that, and
I'm just having a brain cramp. The DEP is what, 60 decibels or 80?
well, it's, their
then 10
standard's 10 decibels above background.
Above background, but okay.
60 decibels is typically, our conversation right now is about 60 decibels, but they would ask that a study be done, and then anything 10 decibels. So we're going to be a bit more strict than that.
That's what I was trying to compare the two. Okay.
But, keep in mind, based on what the applicant has said, with the type of inverter used, they're agreeing to a 6-foot-high berm. They've relocated some inverters. They took several rows away. They certainly appear confident that they won't have a noise issue, but I think the sound study will give everybody a sense of safety.
Yep.
Grammatical, should we just call it LG Norse in there? Just to, not just Norse, LG.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just going forward, I know Amy mentioned that at some point we may want to consider putting in what happens with a violation. I'm not suggesting this looks a little bit heavy, but this was actually taken out of the handbook as well, this language. So it was in the handbook too, but just providing some mechanism. I think she mentioned that you might want to impose some violation standard. Again, that's what's in the handbook. That's in 10 days, shall be rescinded, which is a little tough.
Yeah. If violation is not corrected within 10 days, the permit may be rescinded, as opposed to, there may be extenuating circumstances where they.
I'm just I'm looking for something, this was, happened to be on a handbook, so we have something to stand on.
You can't replace a dead shrub in the middle of winter, there's things that are gonna fall outside of that.
Do you see that, Paul?
The maybe.
That would insert may as opposed to shall.
Yep.
Is there anything else? Just trying to see.
Well, Amy also had a comment on the sound study, just asking when there should be a trigger as, such as 1 month after construction. So if we're talking about it's been constructed, it should be at least prior to operation. Prior to operation,
I think, is a good way to state that.
But will everything be running?
Yeah,
Yeah, you want it when it's running too. Right, you want it when full load of power.
right. So it's
Well, no, the original
it's
one
built.
prior to anything.
Yeah, the original one's
Prior
the
to,
other one, I think she
It's-
mentioned 1 month after operation or something?
Yeah.
Well, it's, right, but I think what we could work with, is test it before it becomes operational.
Live.
Yeah,
I mean,
so it's
We want it running-
constructed,
We want
Yeah,
it
you
running
have
the
to
way it's
have it
gonna run, so
running,
we
I
can
mean-
tell.
right, right.
You're gonna have 2 studies. Doing it
minimum.
Yeah.
doing it that way is you'd have 3. I mean, because there's corrective language in here that, if it's emitting sound, they're gonna have to put up barriers and the like. I think we're covered, but I think it ought to be done, the second study should be when it's fully operational, and frankly, a nice bright sunny day where it's humming as much as it's gonna hum, as opposed to a day like today where it, might not generate any
I'd like to
noise.
see the second study, as involved as the first, 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should.
Yeah, it should
Yeah.
be the exact,
Exact same
yeah.
timeline and parameters.
Does time of the year make a difference?
Well, one of the folks at Clapp Street, which I thought was odd, and I'm no astronomer, said that it's worse in the wintertime because somehow we're closer to the sun. That didn't make sense to me.
The leaves are not
Leaves
on
are
the
off the
trees anymore.
trees.
Well,
so
no, because, there's no,
Yeah.
that wasn't it. She said something about the fact that during the winter, which I would think
We're
we're further away from the sun. I'm not an astronomer, but she referenced the fact that it was worse in the wintertime, because the sun was closer. I don't know.
Could we say something, the second one should be taken at a time to reflect the maximum result of the field? Or something referencing, whatever that is, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess you could say second study should be done in the winter.
No, I don't wanna,
I would say
Make
a
that
month
claim
after,
if-
or
Why don't we-
2 weeks after operation, once they're up and running.
At a time to be agreed upon by, pick
Let's
the
kick
planning.
the can.
The consultants, the peer reviewer.
We can do it prior to final occupancy. I can give them a temporary occupancy, let them go up and run. We can issue it for 90 days. And have the study done within that period, and then prior to final occupancy.
Yeah.
yeah.
That'll
Gives
give
us-
them time to do any mitigation if they do, yeah.
And some leverage.
But to go back to the violation for a minute, the court's not gonna allow 10 days for the permit to be rescinded. They're gonna ask for 60 or 90 days. You have
Well-
to give them a reasonable amount of time to make the remediation. So that 10 days is unenforceable.
Yeah, I would think so. That's what was there.
I think we need to rewrite that handbook. Oh, really?
Well, I'll add that to the list for downtime.
That's easy, right? You can fit that in before town meeting.
Well, what if we change this to 30 days? Because this is permissive anyways, we're not, we're not
You have to give them a reasonable amount.
30 days, and then it may be, by the time we do anything, it'd take another 30 days to post an agenda and act on it and record a vote.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so just back on the sound then, I will move that second study to be prior to final occupancy. That's when we would,
But we want to have language in there that says it shall be the second study shall be done when the facility is fully operational, but prior to final occupancy.
Okay, I'm just trying to think how that,
Because, it infers that there's going to be a temporary occupancy.
If you want the 7 to 10 day study, then yeah, you have to be up and operational.
Yeah.
well, okay, I just wanted to just have 90 days after initial well, I want to make sure it's fully operational.
Right.
yeah.
But I think the fact that we're still, in terms of holding some leverage, they've got a temporary occupancy permit. In order to get the final, which they're gonna need for banks and everyone else.
Right.
So there's some leverage there.
I don't know if I'm opening a can of worms here, but, okay, so we do that study prior to final occupancy. Is there a point in which, post-construction, it's up and running? Is there anything we do at that point? Let's say it passes through final occupancy, no problems with noise.
That's our goal.
Well, I'm just, right, is there anything that
What
we
about-
need?
What about 5 years out, 10 years out, systems, an issue?
Written complaints,
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
upon written complaints, penalty follow-ups.
You do that anyway?
I do that anyway, but I don't do
Okay.
sound, I don't have audio equipment, there's no way I could perform that, so.
Well,
It's an
again,
expensive complaint follow-up.
this special permit runs in perpetuity, so that I assume, well, I shouldn't assume anything. What if we put,
Unless there's some sort of vague,
the
some-
noise
there's
threshold
complaints, they
shall
have to
not
mitigate
exceed 10% above background levels during the life of the project?
Yeah. I
So-
know that they occasionally go out and change transformers, and the pitch might change as the transformer's dying or nearing the end of its lifespan, so.
Should the,
They do maintenance on these facilities, so I'm sure they upkeep them.
But since we're, using this 10% above background, and that background established in 2019 and 2029, it should still be applicable, not more than 10%.
We can always do a survey. The only problem is who's going to pay for it if it's down.
yeah, that's what it comes down to, should a future study be required in order to determine, the only way you're gonna determine is if you do a study to determine if you're 10% above.
So if we put in here, the noise threshold shall not exceed 10% above background levels at inception or during the life of the project, or words to that effect. So
Yeah.
that you say both then and throughout the life of it, it can't
Yeah.
exceed 10%? Anything else? Correct date?
Orin, you had some additional notes
I
here.
had
it
some
looks like,
additional
on the
notes.
back
I
page.
did,
Just to clarify before you get to that, because I saw you changed the date on the record of vote. That would have been the last week's meeting, right? I'm not sure what the reasoning was for changing the date, Orin.
I didn't change it.
Oh, did
Yeah,
that just
yeah.
auto-populate, like, because you drafted this on the 9th?
Maybe.
It went from April 2nd, and on yours it was April 9th, so I thought
Yeah,
you
it should be
specifically.
the 9th, though.
Today's the 9th.
Today's the night.
Today's the
Today's the
9th.
9th. Oh.
Yeah.
It was last week
So-
we
Oh,
approved
yeah,
it.
so
Be the
it's,
second.
yeah.
So I just wasn't sure why.
I didn't change
I
it.
have to confirm this with Amy, but I believe what she had told me was the night that you approved the decision is what this is, but I need to
this-
confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Oh,
didn't-
this, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh, so then not the second, Paul.
okay.
All right, so we'll leave
I
it.
don't, I don't think
Well, you
so.
got it, changed, yeah,
I will pick the right date based
Okay.
on council's advice.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Because, yeah, obviously we'll have to have this
There
all
was,
corrected
there was a
anyway.
couple of other things on the last page. The first part.
Hold on, I just want to make sure we have gotten, when you say the last page, the last,
No, I see, but if you look, keep going, there's another page. I made some notes on.
okay, because there's nothing else on Paul's.
Correct.
Yeah,
It's okay.
I did mention fire department, but I did note that Paul did pick those up, so you can disregard those. Then there were a couple of things that I had notes
So
that,
all of item number 1?
yeah, you've covered that.
What page are you on, Warren?
I'm on the
Final-
last page,
final
page
page.
7.
On your document?
Of his.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't notice that at first, I was just referencing it, you did pick those up.
Yep.
Incorporated it. There were just a couple of things that I had in my notes that I just want to throw out, I don't know if we want to reference them as conditions. There is a specific requirement to use string inverters. They confirmed the one they're using, they also believe it was going to, I think it was going to be only 25, limited to 25, and not closer to, I think it was 360 feet from the playground. I don't know if we want, that's probably on the plan, I don't know if the.
It is.
On
the plan.
Okay.
Weren't they on the opposite side of the,
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah, and then just referencing that they will use string inverters. The other thing was, I know we talked about the pilot plan, and I know when the selectmen were here, they said they didn't want this thing going forward till they had one. I don't know if we can make that a condition. We can delay approving it until that is satisfied, how we deal with that. I don't want to cut the town off from being able to negotiate an appropriate pilot program by giving a permit and then them trying to negotiate. I just don't know the timing and how we do that.
Yeah, I don't know that that one is needed for the other. Certainly to have an approval will help open the door for a pilot.
I believe I heard last night that it's going before town meeting in May. I think it might be one of the articles in May, Orin, the pilot for this. Don't quote me on that, but I think I might have heard that last night.
But in terms of our, role in this, I don't know if that's for us to specify or speak to,
It's, your decision's not contingent on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to hold based on that.
I'm not sure what the town, the selectmen mentioned that they didn't want to, they were still negotiating.
Yeah.
Here they mentioned, I don't know whether.
But I mean, we were, we're tasked with reviewing the special permit site plan, which is what we did. That's the bounds of that.
And they're still, I believe they're still going through Conservation Commission.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They've, actually, it's continued to the 29th. They didn't even go last
Yeah.
night. And so I'm not sure, and it is determined to be an area of critical environmental concern. The other things, I had some notes on 3.5. They talked about including a 30% discount to abutters and a 50% something to somebody for saving a $24,000.
The school, I thought there was something to the school.
And I don't know if that's something.
They said it was something that it was to the abutters and then to low-income housing.
Yes.
Low-income housing.
Yes.
Is that something that we addressed in this condition?
Well, that's still something that the town manager and the board will continue to negotiate with them.
but that was in the Clap Street special permit, that there was actually a mechanism, if I recall, for, that there was a certain form they had to, I think I have it here. it was spelled out in the Clap Street special permit.
Yes, there is a condition in there regarding the energy discount.
If that's the case, I'd recommend we hold and get clarification from the selectmen.
Yeah, the applicant offered to, this is in the Clap Street special permit. The applicant offered to provide property owners listed on Exhibit B with a 30% reduction in their electricity rate, G1, which shall begin facilities, it doesn't read right, which shall begin, the facility begins producing it. As a result, it shall be a condition of any relief granted hereunder that a 30% rate reduction shall be available to the owners of the 10 impacted properties unless and until the solar facility is disconnected. Provided a Schedule Z form is submitted by the relevant owner. So I don't know who the affected abutters would be.
Would that include the school?
I don't know.
Yeah, they had something
they're
for
a
the school.
butter.
It's more than the abutter.
They're in a butter, but
They did say, they agreed to doing that, is what I remember in their presentation. You can.
I mean, we'd have to really,
I may be
Get
crazy,
specific
but I think the
language
LG Norris, at least initially, was electric heat.
I know they were gonna get a percentage off. I don't recall if it was the same as the abutter.
So that would be a heck of a discount. It seems to me,
I think they run our radiant, force hot water base.
all right, they may have changed, right? Anyways.
so where do we go with something like
I
that?
would recommend to table this until we hear from the selectmen.
Warren's right, he did, the first time we heard Daniel speak to it, that's what he proposed,
Yeah.
so.
Do we know what meeting that was?
It was the very first one.
It was March 5th.
I just wanna see, because I feel like I wrote something about that down.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, 30% sounds right. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, the-
it was for the abutters and low-income housing.
Right.
And there was
50% for one was 50% and one was 30%. 30% was for the butters, and then I can't read my notes. So 50%.
All right, hold on, Orin, let's see,
Okay.
let's see if one of us wrote something down here.
30% discount for abutters, STEM program with school and make improvements, which would be like the playground, but that's a plan with the school, and so is the STEM program. I think
Right.
that's
Yeah,
the
they'd have
school.
to
But it does say 30% discount for abutters,
All right, hold on.
500 to 600 feet from Plain Street. Oh, 500 to 600 feet from
Yep,
Plain Street was
here we
the
go.
first thing, but.
50% low income, 30% abutters, P3 with the school pilot
Yep.
for 20 years, 400,000.
who's low income?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Those are my
It,
notes.
it would mean the state requirement.
Save the town 24,000 a year.
That's what.
That seemed, that might be, and I might have written down.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're approaching our 10% target rate. Is that gonna go to everyone in Norton that qualifies as low income housing?
I think I'm not sure.
I think.
Well, there was
Yeah.
also a program for low income, so not just abutters.
But which low income? I mean, we've
Yeah,
got
who?
East Main Street up here that's,
Is it determined by
Yeah.
National Grid, though? I mean, because they have a program, so maybe that, yeah, I'd like to find out.
we're probably gonna need clarification
Yeah.
on that
Okay.
piece. Let's see if we can't wrap up everything other than that.
The other thing was, they did agree that it was going to be a fixed tilt, it wasn't going to be moving. And I think we ought to put that in as a condition, because that raises different noises issues and mechanical issues. In addition to being the string converters, the small string converters. That's what.
I don't know if we would have to list that as a condition, as long as they're under the sound requirements, right?
That's
I
on
mean,
the
we
site
can't
plan.
just tell them.
It's on the site
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah,
too.
and if they
Yeah.
change,
Diagram of
to a
the-
battery, they need to submit it to the site
Okay,
plan. so.
I know that they agreed to that, that's what we're going to do, that's what I mentioned.
Right.
But that was the, yeah, that would have been on the site plan.
Yeah,
as
there's
such.
a diagram of
Yeah.
the proposed
Okay.
panel on the
Okay.
site plan. Or
Okay. And then I just referenced, there is the conservation, they were not at the last meeting, they have, it sounds like they have a bit of work to do. They were required to do a test pit and give their results to the conservation. I don't know that that's been done yet. So they're not exactly on top of getting one imminently. So I don't know if we wanted to hold off anyway until that's done. At least get a better idea what they're doing.
I mean, how does that affect us? I mean, the Concom has its own area of jurisdiction and their own enforcement provisions.
Our bylaw really wraps around environmental stuff. It says they have to comply. I'm not sure which bylaw they're applying under, whether it's
Well, there's no special permit anymore, at least this week.
but it-
So,
but it
and
does
it's not in a wetland protection district, it's not in a water resource protection district, it's not in a floodplain, so there's no special permit required. So what is it that they have to do? that
There's a
the-
wetland bylaw, the wetland bylaws,
But that's Concom's jurisdiction.
but it's wrapped into our bylaw relative to solar talks about that as being a condition. It's subject to that being in compliance with. I'm just saying, if we wanted to, we can defer that, and that has some implications in terms of our denial of other permits that we've done, because that has not been in place.
Well, I mean, again,
If we're holding off anyway for deferring this to get some response, the rest of it, that becomes moot at this point.
well, the only thing, correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing we're holding off on is
The percentage
the
of
percentage for
discount.
Yeah.
the pilot. That's the Board of Selectmen and/or assessors have jurisdiction over that. We don't. And here again, the Concom has both a charge and the ability to enforce whatever it feels it needs to enforce. I don't know that we have to sit and wait for them to do their thing, particularly since, I'll just leave it at that. Again, if people feel differently, then let's have that discussion, but I wanted to, and we're close to wrapping this one up, and I think the only thing we have open on this is the discount. All the other things, let me just to be clear, it does make sense because that was part of the thinking, that they'll use small string inverters. I mean, that's part of the submittal anyways, but put it in for belt and suspenders. I think that's it.
I don't think we should put in the string inverters, or I don't think we should mention those at all, that they're on the site plan.
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt. Again, that was part of the, I'm going to call it the selling points of this particular project, is they didn't have central inverters. Again, it's perhaps redundant, but it doesn't hurt. So that with all the other items we've talked about, how do we wrap this up tonight with that one?
Well, I think ultimately we need a fully revised version, you know.
All right, so
So,
I've got this frustration that we're treading water here. I'd like to wrap this up with the understanding we have one open item. I don't want to revisit anymore. Again, let's beat this up if we have to tonight, but put it to bed other than that one item.
Does it have to remain open? We're not gonna be able to change the percentages or anything like that. Can we stay with the stipulation that, I don't know how to put it. You had the owners listed in the other one, correct? On the Clap Street?
Well, there was an attachment apparently that makes reference to. That's the other question. I don't know who the abutters are. I mean, there would have been abutters in terms of a notice requirement, but some of those people just own property. There's no houses. So, it's not only the percentage, but who qualifies for it.
In Clap Street, did it go to the owners of the property or just the individual people? Does it go to the land or go to the property?
No, it went to just the homeowners.
So if they sold, they didn't get the benefit of it?
Don't hold me to that, Orrin. I thought it went with it, but,
And it was limited, I think, I think there was like 3 years on it. But I'll coordinate with Mike tomorrow to see about the status of the pilot and the discount.
Who negotiated the discount? Was it just something that was brought
was
up?
It's part of a state initiative.
Well,
So I can get that info to you and then find out where it's at.
If there's nothing we can change, can we move forward the stipulation that be inserted in the decision?
What if we put it in a finding that the applicant is,
Condition. Okay.
would have to be a condition, couldn't be a finding that they're working with the town to create a pilot and incentives for low income and
Yeah, I mean, on the finding of facts, item number 7 speaks to applicants say during a public hearing, they would provide public benefits to Norton Public Schools, including removal of dead trees, supporting STEM education, helping update the playground and outdoor classroom area at Norris Elementary School. I don't know if that's if that's the place for that,
that's what I was thinking.
Make it number 8,
like a number 8.
referencing the pilot and the energy.
Does the applicant have any agreement of these? Something stated or says, no, we didn't agree to that. Where does that leave us?
Well, I mean, but they did, and they offered that. Now, whether they're
Yeah, so it
required
just needs to be
or not.
specific with what that, what that was.
All right, what's your pleasure? Do we,
I think we can make a motion to approve with the changes made, still having the stipulation on specifics on a future finding for number, you said number 8?
Yeah, it would be number 8 under finding of facts.
so that we're legal, that we approve this, that Steve not sign it until such time as number 8 is fleshed out. That's bad language. But you understand what I'm trying to get to.
Sure.
Wait, didn't you motion?
What?
No,
I was gonna make it.
I'm sorry, Orrin, you're.
I'm not clear what you're doing. You lost me.
Well, we've made changes to this draft based on Paul's, Amy's, and your comments that I think we're all in agreement on. The one thing that we can't wrap up tonight is what we're going to put in under 8, which references the discount and who's going to qualify for it.
Can we specify we're gonna make that a finding or a condition?
Yeah, well, if
I
it's
thought
number
we were
8,
gonna-
it was
That's what-
finding of facts, it would be number 8 underneath the one referencing the schools.
That's right.
I would say you definitely want a finding of fact on that.
Okay.
The finding of fact is they agreed to provide
Right.
these discounts.
Yeah.
And then you could make it, then you gotta make it, but it still needs to make it a condition.
Well, then we'll put it both places.
Okay.
My request is someone make a motion that we approve this document with the stipulation that under findings of fact number 8 and under conditions, that the offer made for discount to abutters, with the abutters being defined, be included, subject to Steve not signing the final document until that language is in there,
As a condition.
as both under findings and a condition.
So moved.
And we're gonna explore the 50% to the low income,
Yes,
and if it's, so it's both?
the discount,
That's under-
so it would be the pilot, the discount to low income, and the discount to the abutters.
Okay.
Second.
That was the motion?
Frank might motion.
All right.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We got something done tonight. Let's hope we can keep this up.
On fire.
Okay. Which is which here?
Okay, so,
Agenda here. 4 seconds. I'm sorry?
yes, so we are on Blue Star. And we have, where it will take up, oh, so we have,
I don't have anything.
do you need to call this, do you need to officially identify it?
Well, yeah, I'm reaching for it.
I'm using a crazy.
So we have two versions. This is now
Yeah,
Blue
which-
Star
which
1
version?
through 5. Okay, so
All right, yeah, so Paul, get us to where we need to be here.
black and white,
What we
black and
got.
white only were the changes included that you all made last week. The one in
Run.
color,
479.
479, correct.
Okay.
And then the one in color represents the changes last week, Oren's comments, and Amy's comments.
So
right,
does it
so-
go our changes, Oren's comments, and then Amy's comments on Oren's comments?
Yes.
Okay. Just for
So-
order of operation,
Blue-
sorry, just for order of operation on how this got flushed out.
So blue are the comments I made that were just strictly what you all made the changes last week. Amy's are in red, and Oren's are purple.
So just for clarification, the public hearing on this has been closed, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yes.
I just want to make sure because of the last meeting, so
Mr. Chairman, could we have copies?
Oh, yes. Do we have an extra set?
We'll have to make them.
Because we, as Steve has reminded me, public hearing is closed.
Right. All we did last week was clarify requested changes that we had made.
Well, all right. Nicole, do you have an extra copy of the colorful one? Would you mind grabbing that,
Yeah,
just so they can follow along?
I had asked council if we are able to, once the public hearing is closed and you all are working on this, am I able to give any applicant copies of the drafts you're working on? I'm still learning Massachusetts open meetings laws, so I know that there was a request. I wanted to make sure I wasn't violating it, and I didn't hear back from her. So
Yeah, I mean,
I wasn't trying to ignore, I just wasn't sure what my responsibilities were here, so it's.
And just in past practice, we have always received, in every building that we've done in Norton, was draft copies before finals
Okay.
were voted and approved,
Yep. We're
both with conservation and here.
We're working to get you a copy, just, but just so I'm clear in terms of the colorful, I'll call the colorful one. The colorful one has every suggested change there is.
Yes.
So what was the black and white one again?
Black and white one was
stuff that we
simply,
did.
it was the baseline. It's the baseline from last week.
I'm just making
I mean,
time for Nicole to get back.
Yeah, so the baseline was including the changes that you all made last week.
This is the color. I've got 4 copies
You
in
can't
front
miss
of
that.
me.
So we had to print it in color, the second one, just because if it's in black and white, I couldn't tell you who made what.
Right. Okay.
Well, the very first one, I'll apologize, you don't have it, but all it does is it provides the title of the special permit, so.
Well,
that
we
was-
changed the font.
Moving on.
Let's have a discussion on whether it should be 12 point or 11 point. All right, so we'll go down that.
It's just,
The next correction is special permit is capitalized. Number 5, what's happening? Site plan is capitalized. Approval instead of review.
Yeah.
right. So it was changed from site plan review to site plan approval, all caps. On
Yep.
the- or it's all
Okay,
first
so
letter caps.
I don't think there's anything that's going to give anyone. Again, next page, approval is put in.
Yeah.
I also brought down building 7.
Yep,
Should I do both, or which one is?
Give them both. Give them both.
Whose is what?
Then we get down to conditions, here again, approval, and special permits, capitalized, and then we put in, or someone's put in, grant of the special permit. Again, all this is
Amy.
language. So not,
Thank you.
all right, so you've got a copy now, just so that you can follow along? I just want to make sure. We're on the, let's see, page 3. The other stuff is just editing. Number 3 under conditions. This decision.
Yeah, we discussed
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yep,
just
that's
want to.
good.
2 years for good cause to be determined by the planning board, right?
All right. Da, da, da. 4, projects to be constructed in accordance with the site plan approval, not otherwise without the review of the,
Which one are you on, Joe?
number 4.
So, Orin, that mimics the language.
Yes. I was picking up, basically, change has to be, if it's minor, approved by the board, and if it's major, it has to come back before the board.
Okay, so this is the same language as we did for 54
Yeah,
Plain.
did we change that? I don't think we
Yeah.
changed this language. Or did you?
Number,
On 54 we did, 54 plain.
yeah, yes, we did. For Plain Street,
Yeah.
that was approved.
All right, so we want the same language. Let me just make sure that,
There's one of those you did an edit to, Joe, I'm not sure which one it was.
It was the ordinance language in the last sentence, right? Zoning ordinance, is that,
Yeah. Yeah, the zoning ordinance.
Bylaw.
yeah.
In 4.
yeah,
Right.
okay, so. Okay, so with that, the only change we're going to see is zoning bylaw. The other language is the same language we used at 54. Okay.
So there wouldn't be that, at the end of 4, where it says C 175-50.
Yeah,
No, that won't be.
That's not there, right?
All right.
Take out.
I've jumped down to number
Yeah,
6,
okay.
and we had,
We discussed that a lot.
we eliminated that in the 54, but Orin was making reference when we were discussing 54 to certain things that was not applicable to 54 is applicable here, so floor is
Yeah,
yours.
the concern, I believe the bylaw, I'm not sure which section it is, does require the applicant to provide documentation of the easements and restrictions. In this case, you have multiple lots. We have cross easements, and you have restrictions, and then you have cross obligations relative to stormwater. I think they limited that, but I think there's still some cross obligations. You certainly have a common driveway, who's maintaining it, who's plowing it. The question I was raised, and Amy brought up, you have one owner, there's no problem. The problem comes in with the sale. We have to make sure that those restrictions and easements are in place with some mechanism, I think, that we're comfortable with. Certainly, the applicant doesn't care, but once they sell it, we have an obligation to the people that are buying it. They assume that there's some obligations in place to deal with that. They don't know that there may be off-site stormwater, whatever it is. And I just think there needs to be some mechanism that triggers, if they're selling, that we need to be provided with the copies of those appropriate easements so that everybody's in place in terms of their obligations.
My argument against that is similar to the one before. I mean, we can't require a potential buyer to come before the planning board. I don't see how that's a possibility, or even legal at this point.
Try.
And they have an operation plan, I believe, that we received copies of too, so.
Just remember that this approval will be recorded. So it's at the registry of deeds, and it's on title with the property. So it's on title with every piece of property that goes with this development. So on transfer, the new owner has to pick up the title and is part of the approval process. They have to do their due diligence. It goes with the property.
If the property is not plowed, how is the building inspector, if there's no agreement of record, and everybody is responsible, how do you enforce the obligation to plow? How do you enforce an obligation to maintain a storm drain if everybody is responsible? Don't forget, you have now, they separated the lots on 1, 2, and 3, they're individual lots. I suspect they might be selling those out, individual lots, and now you have cross easements and common driveways. Normal practice, there is a civil easement agreement that's usually put in place, and it's usually not an issue, but those are usually put in place at the outset of a development. It's not being put in place now. I'm not saying we have to approve a buyer, I just want to make sure with the transfer, we make sure that those easements are in place, if they're not in place now.
I wish town council were here for this, because that's, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe you can't require any prospective, purchaser to come in. I don't see how that would be possible. I understand your concern, I do, I know what you're
Yeah, and this-
getting at on it,
this
but I
is-
don't, that's not something that we can, that's completely overextending ourselves.
Yeah, let's, because council will be here next week, correct? Let's skip over that for the moment.
Can we see if maybe take a vote on this among the board? Should I?
In terms of,
Because we're gonna hit this on the next one as well, and I don't think this is something that we should even be stipulating on anything, let alone just this project.
Me, as a business, I would say,
It's completely unheard of to request that potential buyers come in before the planning board. That's,
well, I'm not suggesting that I buy this language, but I understand the concept. I don't think I'm in conflict. When, although you haven't seen it, when I came before the planning board for a common driveway, there was a question, a legitimate question, is who's going to be responsible for maintenance? And I said at the time, that hadn't been worked out yet. But it's a legitimate question. At the time, originally, there was just one home. Now there'll be two, so that language has to be worked out. And that's just a 3-lot.
it's my understanding that though with this, they have an operations manual which, says who's responsible for the sewers, the plowing, all of that. We've received that and we've gone through it, so.
But
I personally think that this, if this passes and we request, or we require potential buyers to come in before the board, I think that's just opening us up.
But here again, I'm
Legally, I don't
not
think
saying that, that I'm buying this language, but I think there's some merit in the concept that if in fact parcels are going to be sold off, and there are shared facilities, be it parking lot or whatever else, that, if a restaurant buys one of those buildings, they're wildly successful, and parking is all over the place, and now everyone else is complaining about, you have no parking. I'd like to have a document that says, well, they're entitled or they're not entitled to park in front of your store. Right now, we can say, hey, it's your problem, you're the developer, you're the owner, you figure it out. But when the owners are 2, 3, 4 deep, what do you point to? The other part, the private enterprise part of me says, well, tough luck, Mr. Restaurant owner or Mr. Shoe Store, whatever's there. You should have done your due diligence in advance.
No, well, in your case of a restaurant, they'd have to come back for a special permit anyways.
Yeah,
But I'm saying, I think this, I'm at a loss for words on how to put this, but I think we're completely overextending ourselves. We're not, I don't think we have a right to do that. That's my opinion.
We have an O&M plan for managing the on-site functions of the facility. There's a property management agreement that'll be done, and there's a fully negotiated reciprocal and easement agreement for cross easements, everything else between the driveways, everything else that's there. That's not final, it's not recorded yet. It's practically about 100% negotiated amongst the landowners and the property owners. I think that you're going into an area having buyers and buyers coming in on a transfer of ownership of a property, most of those things are all confidential in nature. So if you're gonna go to a public meeting, and I'm gonna say, I'm buying this property, I was buying, just for example, say someone was buying Horizon Beverages building, and the Horizon Beverage people didn't want that in the public. I'm in a public forum, that can't happen. You know, there's provisions there that protects buyers and sellers under that nature. So I think we're kind of breaking this down into different areas, that there's always going to be a management agreement, there's a reciprocal easement agreement, that's in place, that's recorded, that's deeded. It's with the title.
But right now, and I don't know, the property is under singular ownership, correct?
No.
Oh,
There's existingly 1, 2, 3, there's 4 contracts in place. 4 owners.
I just see this opening a huge liability for both the planning board and the town. That could potentially lose a sale. I mean, that you get into all this stuff that you don't want to get into with this. I've said my piece on it, I'm not gonna keep harping
I'm with
at it,
Steve
but
on this.
I don't know why that would even be in there to begin with.
Our
We'll
role.
discuss it. We're here for a specific reason and stipulation that potential buyers come back to us on the sale. I mean,
No,
that's,
it's
it's
not potential
absurd.
buyers. Stop, Steve, it's not.
I hear.
That's exactly what this
No,
says here,
that's
transfer of
it.
ownership.
Okay, but
That's
you,
a percent.
but they have, if they want to say there's, once, we can make it a condition that they have to record a reciprocal easement agreement or easement agreement setting forth the conditions under which, the property is going to be maintained, snow plowing is going to be done. They have to just record it, provide us with recorded documents before the sale. And I'm sure
Yeah,
they're
we've
going to have.
already discussed that, and we've said that, so.
But we need it as a condition. We need to make sure we get a copy of it and then we know that it's recorded.
It's already recorded.
It's already recorded, or it's,
The approval, your approval here is already recorded,
I understand.
okay? So it's on title, it's on the deed.
No, I'm talking about your reciprocal easement agreement. You said it's almost done, you're gonna record it, give it to us. We don't have to see the sale. We wanna know that there's an agreement as to who's taking care of that property. And we should be able to know that. And what you do with your owner, I don't care. I don't have to look at the owner, the new owners.
But after that point, it's the individual owner of the property, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, those buildings are responsible for the management on each of those. If they hire a management company to go oversee this property or go oversee that property, that's at the discretion of that building owner.
Who's responsible for the maintenance of the common driveway? Pothole opens up.
Right now, it's us.
Well,
We're there.
Not worried about right now, but
Yeah,
that's
well,
my
it's
point.
the management company that's been hired by those building owners.
All right, let's, what's your pleasure? Skip over, the options are delete the language, skip over this language pending town council being here, because, again, or come up with language ourselves.
I would move to remove that language that was put in there. That's in pink and blue there,
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
on
Second,
number 6, to specify, sorry.
I'll second.
All right, it's been a motion and a second to remove the, whatever that color is, pink.
Pink.
Discussion.
I suggest we wait for town council. I don't know what the problem is in deferring to that point. I'd be happy to wait for her suggestions.
I mean, she made a comment on it, in addition to now making the special permit run with the owner instead of the land, which is problematic unless the bylaw provides that one of the special permits run with the owner. That's her comment on that language.
Okay.
So I think she has kind of rendered at least an opinion, maybe not direction, but opinion on it.
Yeah, that's going to requiring them to come in for a buyer to come in first. And
Right.
I'm just quoting what was in, no, that's in the bylaw. That's in our, I'm sorry.
Handbook.
That's in our handbook. So I'm not saying that that's what we have to stay with, but it raises that issue. And that certainly is an issue that I think we need to be able to address. How we address it, I'm open to. And I'd like to get her suggestions on how to do it.
Mr. Chairman, building health and fire departments do annual inspections on these public places, and we enforce property maintenance and upkeep. So that will be part of our ongoing annual inspections.
And that's a condition in here too, right? I just don't know which one it is.
the concern I have, I guess I'm not, I don't like the idea of prior to transfer of ownership. I'll just suggest other types of language that upon transfer of ownership, upon transfer of ownership, maintenance agreements or, responsibility agreements, whatever you want to call them, shall be provided to the town by the new owners, establishing their commitment to, I'm just rattling off, but I hope you understand my intent.
I don't believe we have any legal authority to do that. I don't,
Well,
there's no precedent for that. There's,
okay, a subdivision. You get 20 houses, developer is responsible for putting in the road. If that road is going to be accepted by the town, then the developer has to meet certain performance criteria, and then town meeting accepts the road. If the road is going to remain private, then there's a homeowners association or homeowners agreement that says this is the way this is going to be maintained. Now, if that's in place through this management agreement, then terrific. Then, we take put language in there that the management agreement covering the maintenance of the facilities, common facilities, shall be submitted to the planning board, just so that we have it, so that when someone complains that they hit a pothole in the common driveway and blew out their tire, and trust me, that will happen. In terms of, if it happens, there'll be a call to town hall. Who's responsible for it? If that pothole was in front of, Joe's hat shop, is Joe responsible for fixing that? Or is it the owner of the property across the street?
but now you're getting into, we as a planning board for the town, now you're getting into, we need to be involved in the management of this property.
I
and
could
we're
care
not
less.
managing
I just
this
wanna-
property. So we have no reason to be involved in this as a planning board.
That's gotta
Absolutely
run
no
its
reason.
course,
This
as it does nowadays.
If the buildings are run down, they're gonna lose revenue.
I'm not worried about the buildings.
Yeah, but we have no
because this-
authority to do that.
Because so much of this is, we've approved a commercial subdivision that has common facilities. Be they parking, be they driveways, be they the other things. I just think we ought to have something that says who's responsible for it. I don't want to approve who should or shouldn't be responsible for it.
I'm sorry to
It's
interrupt.
just to have on
So
file?
they sell one building and they have to have an easement for the driveway. In that easement is gonna clearly state, whether they put in the operations manual or whatever they're gonna put in there, is gonna state who's responsible for that. That is not the planning board's decision. That has nothing to do with the planning board. That has to do with the management company or the individual owners, say, 7 different owners of 7 different buildings. There's gonna be easements, and that has nothing to do with us.
And town departments enforcing it.
Yeah.
I can give you an example, Roche Brothers Plaza, we deal with gated properties on a monthly basis, fire, health, and myself, building. We're constantly in contact with them, and we're mandating repairs and upkeeps to the property.
Who,
I own a management
who's the
company, I know
property
how
owner?
this works, so.
Peter Investments out of Florida. Thank you, Peter. Peter knows.
Yes.
That's one entity.
I mean, if we get
Yeah,
that
but it's-
information, it would just go on file? So if anybody were to call town hall, we'd be able to reference who's responsible?
The second any
that's my
parcel
thought.
that sells, that's gonna be on file with, whether it's the easement or with the deed, it's gonna be on file. It has nothing to do
Your
with.
language says this.
Right, the existing language says
The
it.
existing language.
Point
and
of
it- and it
information.
runs with the property.
There's currently a motion on the table. You're asking to add additional language. Should we vote on deleting? That was the initial motion.
That was
to
my
delete-
motion to
The motion was
Yeah.
to remove the.
Remove, not to add language, just to remove.
No, I'm just, again, it may be a minor point, but I was expressing my, I guess, opposition to the motion, but trying to explain why. And any other discussion? All right, there's a motion to eliminate the purple, pink, the pink or language under 6, Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
So, just because we've got it's not unanimous. Julie?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Warren?
No.
Steve?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
I'll vote no. So the pink is removed. Who changed the, put in only? Under 8?
Amy, you saw that last week.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. Number, what's happening here?
Can you just go back? I'm not sure what you added. You said approved, part of the approval by reference only? What is that intended to do?
Oh, actually, it wasn't Amy, Joe, that was, I think, you.
No, I didn't use the word only. Shall be, I said the Conservation Commission shall become a part of the special permit approval by reference.
But somebody wrote only.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I said only.
It might have been Amy.
Maybe because it can't be a condition, it has to be just a. Oh, no.
Is that
Who's blue?
That was a change that happened last week. Right now, I can't remember how that one came in.
I think also your town council had specified last time that conservation has their own jurisdiction.
Right.
Right.
I just don't, again, no big deal. I just couldn't recall where the only came from. I don't know that it matters, but.
It looks like it came from Amy. On last week's, underlined, and then her comment.
We're reading it wrong.
What's her
The records
comment?
only.
Oh, her comment's the next one down, never mind.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's also on the solar condition as well.
Maybe it's just the wording she wanted.
Yeah, fine. I'll
Okay.
just,
All right.
what the hell's going on here?
10.
Number 9 is just renumbered.
You're okay with this?
10, Lot 7 will be donated for open space. What's the comment on that?
As long as they want it. So,
Well, I talked to Jen Carlino about this, and her comment was, it doesn't specifically have to say the town, because it could be the town, or it could be we
could
have
be a land trust, it
nonprofits.
could be anything.
Right. Is this also, is Lot 6 also?
No, lots, no.
Lot 6 is not, okay.
Lot 7 is off.
Well, then
In-
could
Lots-
Do we have any,
It surrounds Canoe River.
Okay, so Lot 7 is it would be up for donation, okay.
then the town could then transfer it. Right?
No, once it
We've
goes
had
to
a-
the town,
To the, no, I'm sorry.
We've had a conversation with the land trust to
Right.
donate it in that process.
is that something we would need to specify?
Yeah, that's
I
what I was
mean,
gonna
we could specify it to say to,
We can't tell you who to give it to or who to
Right.
sell it to or whatever. I mean, we can't dictate
No,
Well,
that.
we don't have to put what the
But they-
town is gonna, yeah.
They've agreed to give it, so who it goes to, we can leave that open, to say to the town or the land trust. But they've agreed to do that. That was.
Right.
Yeah, and it looks like Paul's got language, donated to an organization that focuses on permanent preservation, conservation of land. Something to that effect, something that's open-ended in general, but is
we have-
preservation of open space.
Because if it goes to the town, then, the town, it stays with acts, and obviously this is a very environmentally sensitive area, but keep in mind, any land that's donated to the town for conservation, I believe would need state law approval if we were to do something else with it. So Jen thought if we just had the more general language, we could take it, or land trust. We don't really have a particular interest one way or the
I would
other.
say something like this should be general in nature. We can't dictate to
Yeah.
any specific entity that their property would go to.
Yeah, that gets back to my question, whether, if it's going to the town, would it then go to the land trust, or if we had to specify it?
keep it general.
Yeah, it could go to
Yeah,
Lynn just
keep it
first.
general.
this was just the language
Yeah.
that they had listed, that's what.
All right, so the new number 11,
If I,
again,
if I
who's the author of this?
That's Orin.
As you know, I've raised conditions and concerns about dealing with traffic. Previously, I gave you language in the, MIPA, which really cited the findings. There was 61 findings in connection with the permitting to allow them access to 123. And in it, I think I quoted that language before. It stated, give me a second. It said like the right in and right out was supposed to be dedicated for the retail purposes. It also said on Leonard Street, there was going to be one dedicated entrance, one full entrance for the retail section, and 4 entrances, 2 on Leonard Street going on the south side, and 2 on Leonard Street going north side to service the warehouse. That's their purview. They've given findings which were predicated on the applicant saying that that's what they were going to do. They haven't done that. I leave that to the agency as to whether or not they'll approve it without it. I've given up that battle. And in essence, internally, if there's a problem with that traffic, they'll either fix it or they'll deal with it. And I understand the board's position on it. However, taking it outside of the immediacy of the project, looking at 123, we have before us the queues, which basically, if you looked at the queue under mitigation PM, and I have copies of it to give to you again, it backs up past Leonard Street, the entrance they have, it backs up on PM beyond the main entrance on Leonard Street that services 1, 2, 3, and 4. It also backs up beyond the driveway at Dunkin' Donuts and the whole driveway for the convenience center. It backs up beyond the entrance off of 123. Right now, there's no condition relative to 495, the light going in there. We don't know when and if, given the fact that they have not complied with what they've conditioned relative to the Massachusetts DOT for the access to 123. They also have in that site plan that until they get that permit, they reserve the right to use the existing driveway on 123. That's in their plan. So if those things don't happen, I'm really concerned with the traffic dealing with 123. Between their property and Newland Street, there's a half a mile. In that half a mile, there are 400 residents. I'd suggest that's probably more than anywhere in the town. We're dealing with a project that's significant in terms of its impact relative to traffic. I agree that in the interim, in the initial stages, we don't know what that traffic is going to be like. And even if they didn't put those lights in immediately, and it says right now, I'm not sure we get to that, they're saying after the final permit, they'll be required to put the lights in. I don't think that's appropriate. Regardless, I'm just saying, if 495 doesn't go in, or their light at Newland Street doesn't go in, or during PM hours, the chief of police, in either case, the chief of police finds this an unsafe situation, I would like the applicants to provide the cost of a detail, if required. And I'm just saying, it may never be. And if they're right and it's not a problem, then it shouldn't be. But I'm looking out to try and find some way of giving us a safety valve. The entrance to Dunkin' Donuts is 48 feet from where the traffic light is. And it's the exit from a drive-through. In addition, that complex has a nursery school and a martial arts school, all of which service that area during the peak hours. And right now, one other thing is we had, there was crash information. The consulting engineer requested that they give the crash data for 200 feet around the site. They came back and said, we're giving you what the DOT provided. And the DOT in its provision said, we're giving you the crash site at Newland, at Needham, Leonard Street and 123. According to the chief of police's office, as I provided with this board, there were 9 accidents at Newland, at Leonard and 123, and 25 accidents at the area, including Dunkin' Donuts and the convenience store. That's a total of 38 accidents. Granted, we don't know what they were, but 38 accidents over 5 years, that's an average of 7.5 per year. That's scary for me. I don't know about the rest of you. And when we're talking about possibly not having any lights at that intersection for a period of time, without any kind of controls, and I'm not saying during the whole time, I'm just saying during peak hours, or during the time when those lights are not in place, that we give the right of the police department to put a detail there at his cost. And I think that's only fair.
Doesn't the police department have the right to do that on their own?
At your cost?
Yeah, don't they?
I don't know. Then it shouldn't be a problem.
My problem is at 495 and 123. That's totally out of anyone's control that's in this, either theirs or the town's. And I'm trying to understand how, at 123 and Leonard Street, that's their responsibility for the light. If there's a problem, if whatever is ultimately to be located in that development backs up traffic on 495 and 123, that's Mass Highway's problem. 123 and Leonard Street, it's our problem, but 123 and Leonard Street is under their control in terms of the lights. So I'm trying to understand how there's going to be a problem, because there will be a light at 123 and Leonard Street that they have to put in.
With putting those lights in,
No, let's separate the two lights. 123 and Leonard Street, the light that has to go there is totally under their control, other than getting Mass Highway approval, which I assume is done. So what happens at 495 and 123, notwithstanding the fact that they may be bringing more people off that off-ramp, that's something for, and I don't personally want to see a Norton cop trying to direct traffic on an off-ramp at 495 and 123. And since Leonard Street, that intersection is going to be addressed by virtue of the light they've got to put in, I'm not sure we have an issue.
I'm not suggesting they deal with 495. I'm suggesting we're only looking at that intersection of Leonard 123 for one.
But they're required to put a light in.
It's not there, and they don't have it yet, and they're providing that they don't need to put, until they get it, and they get that permit. But more importantly, is the queue that backs up is with those lights. That's the maximum mitigation. That's with the 495 lights and with those lights. They're talking about backups that close off all of those exits, all of those driveways. And I'm just saying, you got a lot of people trying to make left-hand turns at 4 and 5 o'clock at night, trying to get into the martial arts studio. How are they gonna do it when it's backed up? Then the light changes, and then they've got to go forward. Then they've got another traffic going the other way. So I don't know myself. I'm just seeing the backup. I'm seeing what's there, and I'm saying, if there's a problem, and in the reasonable judgment of the chief of police, there needs to be a detail there, I'd suggest that it be their responsibility. And it's clear, just for your information, some of the material I provided you, requiring details for reasonable situations is not, is an appropriate condition that can't be imposed.
Other discussion, further discussion. I want to see a motion to include this, if you want to make it, Orin.
I'll make a motion to include this language.
Okay, is there a second? The motion fails for lack of a second. We've got on a prior to construction, number 4.
Yep, this is just,
That was what we made last week.
it is.
Modifying that.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah.
Construction hours.
4 o'clock has 2 of those.
Oh. Do we need a motion?
Yeah.
Number 9 is the language that we agreed to at 54.
Yeah, so we'll just copy that over.
Yep. There's a new 10 here. Final special.
That was listed in the conditions that they provided us. It's not waivers, it was they listed some conditions, and I just copied the conditions they provided.
Any,
Is that submitted to us or to Chris and Paul?
That's the way the language, I think, is written in their conditions that they gave us. I just copied it.
But they're just, it's just like, we see it and that's it? I mean, we're not gonna do anything with those things, are we? Or just, I mean, it's really for implementing?
For the final.
just going to be submitted.
Yeah, I mean, that was what they provided us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
You've crossed out the word final.
My question is, I'm not sure what that means. They have a whole site, so if do they have to wait for them to build out this whole site before these conditions apply? Or is it one building and the site that building's on? I would assume that prior to occupancy, these things need to be done, but that's the question I have. At final occupancy, they have to build out all the buildings? Is that the final occupancy? Or is it one building?
It would have to be the first. It would have to be the first building. So they've talked about a phasing schedule, so our assumption is, Chris, correct me, but Building 5 comes on board as their first building, as they've been saying, that they have to get final occupancy. In order for them to get final occupancy, these conditions have to be met.
So, but is it final occupancy for the first building? Or-
It would have to be for the first building.
The first building.
You need to answer that.
I think on our side is, we can operate under the temporary occupancy arrangement until the final is achieved, but we do have seasonality issues that we can't complete everything prior to initial occupancy. So we have seasonality that we can't construct during the winter, we can't put top coat of paving on the roadway, we have culverts and things like that.
So, again, are we talking about, let's say, Building 5? Is it
I
one?
guess, yeah, what's the definition of final occupancy?
Yeah, no-
In terms of
Solar fields, we could issue a temporary occupancy, I could extend that, for a number of times, and then issue final occupancy only upon completion of, conditions.
Well, so,
approved by, plan.
so this says final occupancy, they have to install a signal at 123. So is that after the first building or after the last building? They have to complete the sewer installation.
I thought it was the first building.
That's fine, as long as
Right,
it's,
we should be issuing final CO till these,
well, you're right, but it's for the first building, it talks about the water and the pumping station. I just want to be clarified, what final for the first building should draw down all of these.
Yeah, or does that mean final for all 5? I see what your point is, how do we define final?
I just said prior to the initial occupancy.
It can't happen. We have to get tenants in the building, and we can't complete these things by the time we try to get tenants in the building. So if you want to condition it after 2 of the buildings, fine. Do it after Building 5 and after Building 4.
So.
These items will be completed.
You can't complete
Operate
this.
on a temporary occupancy.
Well, that's why we put it as final occupancy, right?
That's
Yeah, fine.
So
a better approach.
You're not going to complete the installation of the water sewer line, pump station, and water lines?
We can only deal with the seasonality that's coming in. We can connect certain areas of Building 5 and Building 4, because we don't go down the rest of Leonard Street if we run into a schedule issue.
Okay,
So those first driveways, everything can come up and everything can go down.
but your memorandum of agreement with the Water and Sewer Commission has to be completed, I'm assuming, by then?
I would assume if we're gonna use the sewer system, if we can't get National Grid or Columbia Gas, if we can't get Columbia Gas to come in and give the gas line, we can run off temporary propane systems until Columbia Gas comes in. And that means they have to get in the roadway before we can open up the roadway, before we can close it. There are seasonality things that affect us.
Again, in my experience, is the normal conditions to work on temporary occupancies until these order conditions are finalized.
I recommend going with his recommendation.
Sorry, just so I'm clear on what you're...
Where does it go to? Is it just the first building or is it the last building?
If we just agree to the first two buildings, 4 and 5.
That's fine by us. We'll accept that.
And what happens if they don't do 4 and 5? They do 4 and 7?
Well, 7's completely separate. It has
Yeah, that's a separate.
That has its own conditions and findings and
They won't get their
But they're
final
never gonna get a
occupancy.
final certificate of occupancy, you know?
I won't issue it.
Yep.
Right.
Final occupancy is contingent upon all department heads to sign off, so it goes through the whole, every department, conservation, board of health, fire.
Well, it's not the final that we're too concerned with. It's buildings 4 and 5, even if they're, I mean, they could be on temporary occupancies for all of them. And we still have the issue of the light's not in, the water sewer connection isn't made.
Chris, how long is a temporary occupancy?
Well, wouldn't temporary occupancy not be issued if, you wouldn't issue it for all 7 buildings without?
780 CMR defines temporary occupancy as 180 days, and I'm allowed to extend that after written request.
And there are conditions
Back
that's,
to the town planner and work with the
right.
planner.
And there are conditions that still have to be met in order to issue a temporary certificate.
The building has to be habitable, you have to have parking, you have to have landscaping, hardscape, SWIP plans. Again, all the department heads, they will sign off on it prior to them getting even a temporary. So it will be habitable, all the suppression systems, life safety standards, the full gamut.
Right, but that still doesn't address the traffic light.
No, again, so we won't issue that until.
But based on what?
Based on 4 or 5.
Well, that's what what about language, something to the effect that prior to occupancy of more than 50% of square footage? Again, I'm just thinking out loud here.
I think we just agreed to final occupancy for 4 and 5, not to be issued prior to lights being.
Talking about 380, 300, 220, and...
Without looking at it, I'm just,
That's more than 50.
Yeah.
That's more than
More than
50%.
that is, yeah.
50%.
Yeah,
Yes.
square footage wise.
Those two buildings combined are less traffic than the 3 retail buildings.
Yeah, the trip generation of those would be fairly small compared to the size of them. It'd be mostly truck traffic, but
That's correct.
Yeah.
they're not known trip generators.
all right, so
So
we've got,
prior to final occupancy of buildings 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I would modify number 5. Under
Well, the
pro-
heading of
Do we need
that
a
too,
motion?
you can
The
do the
heading.
heading of that, that section prior to final occupancy and just add of buildings 4 and 5.
so the suggestion, or if you want to make a formal motion, prior to final occupancy of buildings 4 and 5?
Yeah.
Is that what the heading would be?
So moved.
In the beginning of number 5 there, or do we do a separate?
You're talking the
Motion
top
for that.
bolded on the underlined part?
The top bolded underlined part and the
Correct.
beginning of number 5.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, there's been a
Frank
motion.
already did.
Oh, Frank already did.
yeah.
Okay, there's been a motion to change this to read prior to final occupancy of buildings 4 and 5. That to be at the title and number 5. That's the motion?
Yep,
And the second, further discussion.
for Frank, yeah.
Okay. All in favor of those changes down to G. Just so we
Yep.
Right.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
All right, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Warren?
Opposed.
Steve?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
I too will vote aye. So we're done to G. Well, what do we got at H?
Are we doing that? You okay with H? The walking path and the 5 spaces?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so H is just a numbering thing, correct?
Yeah.
Warren?
Yes.
Okay, so we're okay with that? So, in fact, the walking path, as far as I'm concerned, can wait till later. So it's not, doesn't matter. Never mind.
Can I ask
The
a
new-
question? Joe,
I'm
can I
sorry.
just ask a question? With regard to G, they're going to now, on their plan, they said they're going to be able to use the existing driveway until approved by the town. Are we okay with them accessing 4 and 5 through the existing driveway?
I'm sorry.
Get that question out. There's an existing driveway there that's probably not sufficient to handle much of any kind of traffic. On their plan, they say to use the existing driveway off of 123 until the other one is approved or installed. And so this would allow them to continue to access, I guess, buildings 4 and 5 by using access, whatever as it exists now, off of 123. I just ask if everybody's okay with that.
And I don't see buildings 4 and 5 as being problematic personally, but that's just me.
Trucks? I don't know what that looks like. I think I don't know if it's paved. I'm not sure what it looks like.
I don't know what their schedule is for doing that work, but again, I'm more concerned with the traveling public and,
Yeah.
all right, so Warren, since you've introduced I, J, K, H,
I is,
hold on, let me just,
I'm assuming that's a condition they've agreed to perform. This is providing the turning lane off of 123, both directions, widening 123, including a turning lane on both sides.
hold on for a second, I'm just trying to. What's going on here?
Doesn't that correspond to the whole intersection? And I has to be completed, just like we said, on 5 and 4, at the same time that the lights and everything else turns on.
It's off-site improvements. That's not part of your property. It's not part of the
But
necessary.
it's part of the intersection design.
Okay, I'm just asking that you're going to, it's part of a condition that you install it.
It's already part of the plan. So I guess I'm asking, why does it have to be in there? Because the plan is already there, it's being approved, the traffic lights.
It's a condition that NEPA has suggested that be in there, and it's something you've agreed to do, and I don't know
I
why
put
there's
it
a
in.
problem with putting it as a condition.
All right, so I has agreed to? I'm sorry, I was looking something up and wasn't paying attention.
No, they said it's already in the plans.
All right, I just.
So the question was, why do we need it as a special condition, or as a
All right.
specified condition?
Process-wise, Orin, you are suggesting this language, you're going to make that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I will. I'd like to move to include that motion, that language.
I only, let's take it one at a time.
Yes.
Is there a second? Fails for lack of a second. J?
The first part of that was in their acknowledged conditions. Second part, I just thought would be appropriate, we can take the second part out, but the first part is one of the conditions they listed in their waivers.
Guess I'm going to refer to Chris. Isn't that a requirement that as part of the building permit, parking has to be striped?
Yeah, we'll assess that, and we've agreed to that previously, and it's been part of the discussion, so.
That's,
Yeah, 9/19 is what's called out in bylaws, and I'm enforcing that.
and that's part of the building permit.
I believe the shared parking was designated on their plan, and that's what they're saying about shared parking. They've just designated Building 1, Building 3. I'm just calling out what they've said was a condition. It's calling out that there's shared parking.
Right, that was on the condition list that the applicant provided.
Can I ask, how does this work? I mean, it's, person parks in front of Building 1, and they have the ability to walk to Building 2 or Building 3. I mean, in that case, it's shared. Maybe I'm not understanding what you're asking, Warren?
There's two of us, because, again, we
No,
all...
that was in their conditions.
No, I understand
Yeah,
that.
right.
I understand that. I guess I'm not sure,
First
how
part of
would
it,
you...
I'm fine with the first part.
How would you
know.
demarcate that? I mean, when you go to Roach, or...
No, it's marked on their plan. So if someone comes to us,
Yeah.
we can say, there's shared parking here. It's on their plan. So at least we have that. If they're not giving us an agreement, easement agreement, we can show that the plan that they submitted shows that Building 1 has the right to park near Building 3. And that's what they said is a approved condition, that they've agreed.
So,
Isn't that on the plan, though?
I guess the challenge there is, we can't enforce that. I mean, that would be the equivalent of going to Great Woods.
but it's, the spaces, I'll read this. Shared parking between 1, 2, and 3 will be provided with spaces demarcated. I assume what you mean, not assigned to buildings 1.
Right now, I believe it's marked on the plan, and the reason they needed to do that was because they didn't have sufficient parking within their own lots. So they had to put parking outside of their lots to qualify for the necessary parking.
So what do you mean by the word demarcated?
I didn't use it, they did. But but I believe if you look at the plan, it talks about, I think there's some spaces behind, let's say, Building 3 that says Building 1. And so they've designated certain spaces that qualify to be able to make the count for Building 1, so they satisfy the requirements of the bylaws.
But I think, I don't want to assume why they did whatever they did, but
That was their language, that's all. I mean,
it's their language to show to us that the buildings had sufficient parking, notwithstanding they weren't directly in front of the building. But I thought when you said demarcated that, they're actually striped so that they're not
No.
20 feet wide or 12 feet wide or 8 feet wide. I don't think that we ought to get involved with, wait a minute, those 3 spaces behind Building 3 are really for Building 1. I mean, they're meeting the parking requirements as the result of their plan, but I don't see why we should be involved in who gets to use which spaces by virtue of someone demarcating. That's just me.
I believe we're doing that to make sure we're satisfied that they have enough parking spaces, even though if you count the spaces on Lot 1, there aren't sufficient spaces. They've confirmed that they're going to give sharing spaces here and allow these people to park there, at least to qualify for the bylaws. And that's that's the condition I think we should see is imposed.
And it's already on the site plans now, Orrin? It's already demarcated on the site plan now?
I believe it is.
Yeah, if it's
Okay, so
shown on
then
the
it's
site
part of
plan, it
this.
wouldn't be a condition.
What if we then
Shared
just put with,
parking has already
You guys
been
don't want to
approved.
put on their own conditions. It's really kind of strange.
Well,
I didn't make this
I
up.
personally don't see the need for this as a condition.
Okay.
Or how we can,
Okay.
If it's on the site plan, that's part of this, right, Paul, or am I
this is just
misunderstanding?
kind of
That
adding,
it's attached to
to
the
add it,
site
it
plan.
feels like.
This, like it becomes.
The site
attached.
plan will become attached to the
Right.
decision.
Yeah.
So when we go out into the field, we have the decision and the site plans with us. So
all right, so from a process standpoint, Again, since there's not general agreement on this, I assume you're making J as a motion, or?
No, I'm not going to make a motion. If anybody wants to make a motion, I'll be happy to second it. I think it's appropriate, but if you don't want to make a motion on it, then I'm not going to start it.
Hearing no motion, we'll move on to K.
Again, this is a condition that they've set forth in their waivers. And it's something they've agreed to. It's not on their plan. They didn't change the plan.
It's on the plan.
No, it's not.
Yeah, the height, the building height is on the plan. It's on the first sheet.
Yeah, it's 35 feet. They didn't change it.
Right, 35, oh, okay, it is on there.
It's on there, 35. They stated in a couple of different times that they agreed it would only be 25. They never changed the plan, and it's in their waivers.
Is there a motion on K?
I move to include that language based upon the fact that they've agreed to do that.
I'll second it.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to include K, which will be a different number, but the language under K, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Yay.
Julie?
I'll agree with that.
Frank?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Steve?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. H.
This is highly regulated by the fire and the building departments. If you're overstepping your bounds, if you try to impose this, mass allowable quantities, types of chemicals are all part of, again, a highly regulated containment, second containment, types of suppression systems. Again, it's in 2 codes, 3 codes, because it's so important. So that again is done.
Plus, I believe it's this in the Water Resource Protection District, it's part of the requirement anyway.
Correct.
All right, is there a motion on H? Hearing none, H is not included. 7. Lose track of what is what here.
Should we add that?
Yeah. Yeah. Is it possible to go back to the 25-foot requirement and say that we can come back to the planning board to amend that?
Well, there is no requirement, we just didn't include it. Or did we? Geez,
No, that one passed.
Yeah, that one passed,
That one
okay.
passed. So if we do have a requirement, we come back to the board.
I'm sorry?
If we do have a requirement that wants to exceed 25 feet, we come back to the planning board
Yeah,
for approval.
Frankly, depending on what it is, it could be a minor modification.
Yeah, that was using the language you guys provided.
Right.
I
If
mean-
we could just add that, I think it'd be a lot easier in case someone ever comes in, looks at the approval and says, look, all you can do is 25 feet.
Right, but you can make a change. If it's a major change, then they could, minor change, they can approve it. If it's not, so you have to come back to them anyway.
Agree.
So,
But I'd rather see that written next to the condition in case this, as legal counsel starts looking at this in anyone in a zoning approval.
Said one word, substantial versus minor improvement.
That's fine, either or. Which
And substantial modifications would require approval by the planning board.
Right.
It's already in there.
That could be problematic, because substantial modification requires starting all over, so you don't want substantial modification.
No.
Yeah, that's the one.
Any variance, any modification,
The-
Zoning.
The zoning allows 50 feet. So if we do have a requirement that wants to come in and amend, we amend.
What about buildings 1, 2, and 3 will not exceed 25 feet in height without approval of the planning board? we're not calling it substantial, we're not, I mean, if you're gonna put 60 feet, that's gonna be a substantial modification.
Right.
You're gonna go 26.
On zoning.
So if we just add to this.
Add to the end without
without,
approval.
without approval, prior approval of the planning board.
That's fine.
Is that
Yeah.
agreeable to all who voted yes or no?
Yes.
That's okay with me.
Yeah.
You voted no, Steve, I just want to.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what. All right, explain yourself there, Warren. Oh, Warren.
I'm not sure what assembly use references. Basically, under the bylaws, within a commercial zone, they can put in a sports facility, which has its parking ratio of twice that of retail. So under their language, I'm not sure what assembly use would be, but if they're allowed to put in a sports facility, they're increasing the traffic there by twofold, the parking requirements by twofold, and I'd suggest the parking during peak hours by a significant amount.
Right. Assembly uses would be things like restaurants, cafes. So those are a high trip generator. So what we're saying is if they did that, then we would have to go to the building inspector or building commissioner, and a revised site plan, depending on what it is, might need to be submitted to the planning board.
Well, I'm suggesting that if they're putting in a use that requires more parking or increases the traffic count, that they come back to the board.
Well, isn't that what 7 is saying now? If assembly use, which would include a sports facility, I'm not crystal clear on what the term assembly use. I assume what that means is anything that gathers people.
Assembly in the building code is defined A1 to A5, there's different uses, and there's definitions. A2 is restaurant, A4 is sporting arenas, so it's highly defined within building code.
So my point.
We will regulate the parking and sporting.
Does it include a sports facility?
Well, you just said it doesn't.
Yeah, speaking of sports, there was one time back in 1995 that there was supposed to be a hockey rink around Walnut Street back in November, back around 1995, but that didn't go through.
But this language, as it currently stands, addresses that. If there's an assembly use, parking counts will be confirmed, and a revised site plan will be submitted if required. So I don't know how that language doesn't cover
Well,
what you're
that's what I
concerned.
didn't know, assembly use, if it's that broad enough to cover all the other uses that would be incorporated in terms of a sports facility.
There's probably 40 or 50 different types of assembly uses defined within 787.
Okay.
Okay, so, we did this last time, number 10. What did we do?
That was the hours,
Yeah.
have to provide at least
And we left it,
48 hours notice for said inspections.
right, and what way we left it last week was I was going to get with Chris. Chris looked at these and we were fine with it. He was fine with it.
So the blue language, everyone is fine with, is that what you're telling me?
The changes, the strikeout under 10A1 upon
That's fine.
completion of excavation, we're fine removing that. And then the applicant, under number 11, the applicant will provide at least 48 hours for said inspections. So we're fine with it.
So basically, you don't have to look at the subsurface infiltration when they dig it?
We will be out there for hole inspections, to ensure frost protection. We'll be out there, I'm going to be out there daily.
Right, but this is just subsurface infiltration. Wouldn't you want to see the hole dug?
They'll call me out and ensure that before any backfill, and then conservation also signs off on a lot of that.
So why are we eliminating upon completion of excavation?
We agreed to keep it in last meeting at the end.
Yeah, I would think that all this stays, and the only thing that changes is the 48 hours.
Yeah, I don't think we
Okay.
removed anything last time.
I didn't
thought it
think
was
so
just-
either.
My question was on if the notice, 72 hours, 28 hours was good for Chris.
Well, they withdrew that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, not that one, there was another, but, so I just want to confirm, Chris, you're saying you would be okay reviewing upon completion of excavation? You want that in there?
Yeah, yes, I'll go out and see both.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so,
So leave that in?
yep.
Okay.
Next page, number 5.
If it's an issue.
Okay, Orin, upon showing it,
I'm assuming there needs to be some kind of showing if the extra spaces, just determine what the determination is.
What was the genesis of this line item?
They have shown on the site plan that there are 38 future spaces for Building
Okay, so
5.
future spaces.
Right. So we were just trying to put a condition in to try to ensure when they come forward, how we go about, approving those, how would we go about approving those spaces?
Well, they should already be approved. It's just a matter of coming to the
Right.
building
Oh.
inspector, and then we get approval to
Right,
construct.
right.
Right, because they're in the.
Approval of construction, right?
so that, well, again, unless
It's
there's-
already approved on the site plan.
Right.
Yes.
And we've, when I say we, the planning board has historically in a number of projects allowed for less than the required spaces to be built and only build them out if they're needed so that, we don't have increased impervious area. I don't safeguard their money, but I'm sure they've got better things to do with their money than create 38 parking spaces if they don't need them. Unless you want to make a motion on that addition, Orin.
No, I'll be happy to second one if someone makes a motion, but I won't.
Okay. Hearing no motion, we'll move on to 6.
We talked about this last week.
Yeah, it's not a change, it's the same.
Just clarifying the removal of 24/7 across all buildings and restricting that on buildings 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
So I think we're good there.
Okay.
Oh, we have to,
I'm sorry.
oh, never mind, sorry.
And 7 is just a new number.
But adding a line, adding a
Well,
second sentence.
Any change in use is reviewed by building, fire, health, to ensure proper life safety and ensure.
This special permit was predicated on a specific use, talking about warehouse uses. If it changes, and there's a manufacturing and industrial use, even though it's permitted, because we're dealing under a special permit, I think that's something that's in the purview of this board and should come back to us. It's just a change of use, warehouse to warehouse, retail to retail. I don't think that's an issue, but if they're intending to change the use from what is now warehouse use into an industrial use, I think it raises some different concerns for us that we, as a board, need to review.
Change in use also requires a new occupancy permit be issued, and again, any new occupancy gets sign-offs from every department head.
All right, in terms of process, if you want to make that as a motion. or
I will
anything-
make that as a motion.
I'm sorry?
I'll make that as a motion.
Is there a second to the addition of language of 7? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Julie?
I said aye.
Aye.
Frank?
No.
Aye.
No.
Steve?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. So do you have those, Nicole?
Yeah. I have the 2 no's.
Okay.
But it passed.
Include this.
Or an,
Yeah.
or, s-
Yeah.
yeah.
7
Yeah.
to include.
I don't know. Okay, there's a new introduction of violation.
This was the same language that we, I think, had in the
We changed it to
Yeah.
30 days,
So-
right?
Yeah,
30 days instead of 10,
And then May.
Or plain language.
so match the language.
Yeah, May, maybe.
Yeah.
And you send it.
So we go 30 days in May. Okay.
Aren't your local laws covering violations? If we violate the permit, the building inspector can take action. Yeah. There are certain things that go without saying. They don't constantly have to be restated.
And here again, and I don't, Warren has it, this is language that is in our planning board handbook under, where are we? Well, it's on page 24. I don't know exactly what number it is, but page 24, item 11, handbook says that the special permit shall basically contain this type of language. Setting conditions on a special permit. Number 11, violation of any of these conditions would constitute reason and cause for the suspension of the permit and cease of operations until violations are corrected. If violations are not corrected within 10 days, the permit should be rescinded. In the previous special permit, we changed that to 30 days, and we made it permissive. So I don't see the,
All I would say is that the handbook is for edification for members and does not have
no, it doesn't have,
enforcement law or your bylaw or state statute.
understood, but again, the language is suggestive in terms of the handbook, and the consequences in terms of the permit, the language we've agreed to is it may be. It's not suggesting that it would be, but that's what we voted to put in. All right, we have no open items left on this, correct? Okay, we have what now constitutes a final findings and decision for special permit 479 and site plan approval. Is there a motion, just to get it on the record, to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Julie?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Lauren?
Opposed.
Steve?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
I too will vote aye, so 479 is done. Okay, 481 is it?
Yeah, Building 7. Again, we have two drafts here. They're both black and white, but the one with the strike-through includes the comments we received today from Amy. The one without, you can see the strike-through on page 1, I should say, and then the one on, we should probably just work off of Amy's. We'll go with that.
Is this black on black?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one with,
It's on this,
the one,
The one that starts with finding of facts 1, where you can see the underline that says as shown on the site plan titled. Let's go with this one. This is the one Amy gave us this afternoon.
That's the one?
Okay.
Yes.
Are we all on the same page here?
All right.
All right,
So
so,
item 1 just renames.
do you have that? Okay. So the first change was just the title, like the other, number 5, capitalization and approval as opposed to review, same through 8.
Yeah. So the changes, yeah, so these represent her changes
Yeah.
that she made on buildings 1 through 5. I've added them here.
The next page, number 2, at the bottom again, it's capitalization and the word approval. Basically, next page 1 is the same thing on 1, 2, 3, what's happening here?
Those are the same language that we just had in the last special
Okay.
permit.
Yeah. So certainly for the items that were overlapping with, the approval that you just granted for 1 through 5, I will make those changes for this as well.
Yeah, change ordinance to bylaw. And
Yeah, ordinance to
or-
bylaw.
Okay, bottom of page 3, construction times, 7 to 7 or dusk. 8 to 4, Saturdays. Just prior to final occupancy, a final approved plan. Again, we're not going to, I'm sorry, page 5, 9I1, we're not going to cross out upon completion of
Yep.
excavation.
Leave that in.
48 hours. Post occupancy, hours of operation.
It's the same language as buildings 4 and 5 in the last one.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem is building 7 is closer to residential. I don't know if there's something that can be put in here that's both workable, but, I mean, if trucks are backing up at 3 in the morning, that can be problematic.
No activities shall be carried on which would be injurious, noxious, or offensive to a neighbor by reason of noise, smoke, odor, gas, dust, vibration.
It seems like it covers it.
The site is naturally surrounded, remember?
Yeah.
With long distance away from any residential property, plus residential
It's a good
zoning
buffer.
next to industrial zoning requires a 100-foot setback and in. So we're designing that, plus we have a massive tree line that's protected all the way through.
I think it's okay.
The language, any change in hours may be done by minor, I mean, isn't that kind of redundant? I mean, you can't add any more than
Yeah.
24 and 7.
Well,
No.
I don't
if you
think.
go less than that, I don't see a reason why you'd need to.
Right, so I think we
anything.
can
Get rid of
eliminate that
that.
language.
No, you have a condition that no activity should be carried on, which is by reason of noise. So if
No,
that,
no, the final
No, no,
sentence.
that's
I know,
less.
but if that's triggered by reason of excess noise or excess dust, it gives you the ability to modify those hours,
No,
to reflect what's above.
any change in hours may be done by minor modification of the special permit. So it suggests that they would want to change
Yeah,
their hours.
that's on there, yeah. Okay.
So, sorry, that last sentence, then any change in hours
I
may
mean,
be
that-
done.
That doesn't seem to be effective in any way. I would suggest we eliminate it.
Strike it.
Any change in hours may be done by minor modification. I mean, what hours could they possibly change?
Yeah,
We're giving them
that's
24/7.
fair enough.
So we need to vote on that, or is it just because that's the only real?
Well, I just, what I've tried to do is anything that seems like it's subject to some discussion, we've discussed it, but I don't see that as a biggie, unless someone feels it is, then we can vote on it, but it looks as though
And I'll add to number 6, the change you made is to 1 through 5, that second sentence would be, new sentence, any change in the type of use.
Shall require
Yeah.
review and approval of the planning
In
board.
the violation language?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I assume you all are okay with adding violation
Yeah,
language
it's-
too.
language is the same as.
Same as
just
the other
approved.
language.
So that's all we have to do with 481, correct?
Yeah, we have to confirm all that.
All right, is there a motion to approve as amended 481?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed?
Julie?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Maureen?
No.
Steve?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
So that's it for tonight because we haven't had a chance to really review the minutes. We've got nothing else? No bills?
No bills.
Joe, can I ask a question? With the amendment coming up, is that something that, with the bylaw amendment, is that something that we as a board want to suggest an amendment to? Once we approve something, can we suggest amendment to? Do we want to let that roll into some other process? Or do we want-
Well, Paul and I were having a little discussion, and Paul believes that, Amy said the planning board cannot amend.
Tonight.
Yeah.
Tonight. But amendments can be made at the special town meeting.
Not as a planning board, we can unless we
No.
vote on it.
Oh, right,
As
well,
an
members,
individual.
members can, right.
As an
But-
individual, you can make.
Why don't, and I don't know what we'd want to put in there anyway, but I believe the planning board can take a position. It has recommended it, but the planning board can also, I believe, make, as a board, amendments at town meeting floor.
Can we take that up perhaps at next meeting? and
Yeah,
see if
can
we
you just check with Amy?
Yeah.
I believe we can, I mean, obviously, the amendments have to be within the scope of the article, but, and I think we need to be careful in offering amendments that somehow violate the, I don't want to say the trust, but these people walked away knowing that there was a motion to recommend the article. So just want to keep that in mind, so I wouldn't suggest any dramatic if
No.
we're going to do it, but I believe the planning board can amend. It can't change the language, it can't move a different, but,
Can we put that item, would that be on the agenda? So
Yeah.
we know we'll be talking about possible amendments?
if Amy
Yeah,
says.
I'll ask her tomorrow.
Good.
Okay,
So-
is there a,
Just outside of that, do we have any other items for next week's agenda?
So next, we do, Fairland Farms,
Okay.
the decision. So I've drafted something for Amy.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So
can't we write just a big no on a piece of paper?
Can,
Doesn't work that easy.
can we defer that until after this vote? I mean, I think,
No, because we have the issue of different members.
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to run into two new members being on. They won't be able to weigh in on it.
Yeah,
That's our last.
And we
Well,
don't
not
know
real-
when Tim will be back.
it becomes,
No.
well, yeah, it becomes moot once this other amendment is, my understanding, if this amendment passes, this, whatever we vote on, and I'm still not clear what we're voting on at this point.
Is that a simple majority or 5 votes for Fairland Farms?
We have to give the decision and the reasons, so we have to.
the vote was a supermajority, excuse me. Yeah, there was a special permit.
Yeah,
So
that
did
it-
not get 5 votes for it
Right. And we denied the site plan.
unanimously.
But yeah, that's something we're going to have to try to wrap up.
Yeah. She was going to spend quite a bit of time looking at that and step you all through, but it is going to be important to clearly articulate the reasons for the denial. So I've drafted up, using the original Clapp Street decision, I used that as a basis to frame it, see how that shakes out with her. But she does have it.
All right, well, yeah, as soon as it's ready to send to us to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, I gave it to her on Thursday or Friday. So, but she fortunately reviewed these today, and then, keep focused on that, since that's coming up next week.
Okay, so that'll be our big item.
Yeah, we'll bring back Pine, or, 54 Plain Street, sorry, and get that.
That's all done.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
We
I'm sorry,
authorize him.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep.
But I will.
We authorize him with,
We have to
Right.
just find out that one issue.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's approved, so we'll get that.
30%.
Yeah, I'll talk to Mike and get that, and then,
Do you guys want to just see these minutes next week, or do you want last week's minutes as well? That'd be 2 sets of minutes. Do you think that's too much?
Well, let's,
No, I mean-
I'd like to get them all, because here again.
Yeah, everybody's here.
Everyone's
so-
gonna be
Whatever you
here.
prefer, I
Yep.
just didn't want to
Yep.
overload you. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'll
what,
have them both.
so
The minutes
what
are
is
not
it?
that bad,
We still
as
have,
long as
these
we
are
get
the March 26th has to be
26th and
approved?
tonight.
Yep.
Yeah.
and then
March
delete-
26th, April 2nd,
Or two,
Yep.
and then today.
and then today.
No, just for two, you want today's by next week too?
If you can, only because.
Yeah, that's the
uh,
best.
We've got people who are leaving, so in
No, I
case
can do
there's
it.
a,
I can do it, I didn't want to do
we've
too
got
many
faith
sets
in you,
of minutes.
Nicole. We've
Yeah.
got faith in you.
I just didn't want to do
Yeah.
too many sets of minutes, because I know there's a lot of stuff to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right, we're on a roll here, meeting every week.
Yeah.
We're
I
gonna
know, you
bang
look-
it out, right, guys?
Tim's wife has a baby, and you guys knocked out all these decisions.
We're gonna blame it on
No,
Tim.
he got out.
Just to add, if they show up Tuesday, the day of, we don't have a chance to review them. I mean, at least I
Yeah.
don't, and
Yeah.
before then, so we just need them beforehand.
We're
Yeah.
just really
Yeah.
focusing on getting these decisions out, so at least we're.
All right.
And I think I heard a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.